with a story for you guys. Hey, welcome back, everybody, here at the Arcane Archive. That's right, we're bringing you another incredible episode of Cautionary Chronicles. Sammy, how do you feel about today's lineup of stories that we have for them today?
You know, it's a bit of a mixed bag. We got some kind of less, balls to the wall, crazy things, a couple lighthearted stuff, but then we also have some question ones,
Rather questionable
some
individuals,
some interesting things for us to talk about here. Some of them with
Indeed.
our aligning with our own experiences. So I think
It's
it'll be
true, it's true.
a bit retrospective one today.
I agree, my friend. I do believe, acolytes, that there's going to be quite a bit of an interesting discourse for today's stories in terms of just seeing how much people themselves might be able to relate to some capacity. There might be a lot of empathizing as well as sympathizing, or maybe you're the type that will judge them irredeemably so for the actions that they've made, despite their attempts at, showcasing their personal plights and their stance and position. It's ironically, either way, going to be truly interesting. And it's certainly not your typical brand of cringe that we like to deliver. I think today's episode is going to be a bit more of a thinker overall, which we love here. And a little bit of the philosophical ponderings, if you would. With that out of the way, as always, please go ahead and comment and like the video. Let us know what you guys think of what we're doing here, the stories that we tell, your personal thoughts and diatribes. It's always great to have a discourse. We'd love to start hearing some more from everybody. As well as, of course, please do subscribe and share the channel. Helps us out immensely. We rely predominantly on just kind of word of mouth and other such things as well at the moment. So any support that you could offer in that regard would be incredibly appreciated. But with that, I do believe that we've gotten all of the house cleaning out the way. Let's just go ahead and get started today. The first story we have for you is titled Confession. I'm the cheater. I'm a spell thief. Dun dun dun. By My D&D Secrets. Also very appropriate name. Hey, look at that. So, I'm a spell thief. Yes, I know. I'm a wizard in a party of 5, and we've been playing since the start of the pandemic. We're nearing level 15 at this point, and I haven't seen a single spell scroll in the wild since, level 8. Just as a heads up, it was for banishment for anybody who might be wondering. Boy, that was a great spell. So anyway, I've started adding spells to my spellbook without consent. No, okay. All right, yes. Some of you are going to say, well, why haven't you talked to the GM? Well, newsflash, I did. I tried many times in conversation. Hell, even when they asked me personally for a wish list of magic items that we'd want, I additionally wrote another secondary wish list of spells that I desired, but, wouldn't take on a level up. Others of you might be saying, well, why not ask your party members to create spell scrolls for you to copy from? They're prepared to list during their downtime. Well, as it turns out, both sorceress, divine, and druidic magic are just too abstract for my mechanical wizard brain to comprehend. It would apparently require me to multi-class, requiring either a 13 wisdom or a 14 charisma. Yeah, no thanks. That is just blatant sabotage. So, what finally broke the camel's back, you might be asking? Well, dear reader, let me tell you. After being told by a great lich's library, or I think he's actually meaning, sorry, after being told about a great lich's library, spending sessions to get there and defeating a now hungry demi-lich, the library was ultimately destroyed. They had possibly memorized the spells and torched it, which, fair, they're evil. Mending and prestidigitation or any repair was apparently impossible. I rolled a good investigation and arcana check, however, but still it felt like a cruel joke. Now, in fairness, we did find a legendary cursed blade that we cured later for our fighter. Several sessions later, the sorcerer also found a wandering stranger, which is probably a disguised dragon, that helped them to unlock their true full potential in a spiritual journey. It also taught them additional spells, and after that, that was just it for me. Pure envy at the clear favoritism. I became a cheater. I never add a spell I've openly talked about, and I remove gold by 2.5 spell level times 100 plus the normal copying price. For instance, I'd love Misty Step, but I'm not using the two spells I could learn on a level up to backtrack for a level 2 spell. So I spend 600 gold, a tax to cheat, and this is me softening my offense. If anyone has noticed, all of my party members are far too polite to call me out on it. Why don't you just leave? This is a problem. Well, I would if this was a random group from Roll20, D&D Beyond, or r/slash Find a Game, whatever. But these are friends that I have known since my school years. From college parties to adult weddings and even baby showers, our friendship is more than just a TTRPG table. Yet, it's also our most consistent get together as we've spread apart. And despite the negatives presented here, I do still very much enjoy my friends DMing. I just feel that I am neglected in this particular department. So, this is just my sin and my confession. I am the horror story. I am the cheater. End post. Well, right off the bat, buddy, you want to go ahead and give a bit of a verdict yourself?
Yeah.
Pass down your
Yeah.
judgment upon this poor, sorry soul.
Yeah. So we've talked about this before. We talked about this in the original Wizard class video.
I think we
We've
did,
talked about this
yes.
in multiple stories. We've talked about this personally outside of
Yep.
recording. Wizards are different than any other spellcaster, similar to how warlocks are like kind of the odd ones out compared to most spellcasters. Wizards have a mechanic that just cannot. I don't think if you have a wizard at your table, you really cannot ignore the spell copying mechanic. That also means if you have a wizard who likes to copy a lot of spells and doesn't make a backup, there are even downsides to being a wizard compared to classes that just have their spells all the time.
Mhm.
But I think you're doing similar to a warlock without an active patron or a cleric slash paladin without an active god. You are denying a huge part of picking wizard as a class. If you are not actively giving your wizard characters, both as a player or a DM, opportunities to mess with the weave. Whether that's learning spells, whether that's crafting spells, whether that's experimenting with spells. There are lots of things.
So many things.
And like, don't get me wrong, I do, I get it as a DM. You don't want to give any one character at your table too many things, right? But you have to understand that for like a martial character, you give them an extra feat or a cool piece of gear
Yeah,
or
cool
something,
weapon,
or
armor,
maybe they like
or
trained to
wondrous
get some
item.
sort of proficiency or something to improve their overall effectiveness. Wizards, while yes, they can learn new spells, they're still very limited on how many they can prepare. And that's the difference. Like sorcerers, giving a sorcerer a boon where they just know two extra spells is huge
That's
because or a bard or something like that. They
that's
always have
incredible
those
for
they
them.
always have those prepared. And like that's because they don't prepare spells, they just know them. So
Yep.
like that's a huge a spike in power and options.
Mhm.
Wizards can learn many spells. In fact, they know more spells than most of the other casters, aside from obviously the prepared casters like druids and clerics. And but keep in mind that yes, they might be able to learn these spells or mess with them, whatever, but they can only prepare a certain amount. And that's the limitation is you're not giving them more spells that they can just fling willy-nilly around. You're giving them choices. You're giving them things that they have to make a decision every day as to what spells they're going to have prepared. And it's a huge choice. It's one of the harder parts about playing wizard is yes, you may have more options than most casters, most arcane casters or weird casters, but you have to make those choices every day. And if you make the wrong ones, you can kind of screw yourself over or
Mhm.
screw the party over in a way. But to just not even really work with them or give them an opportunity, I think is a total waste. The same reason I don't like playing warlocks in campaigns where the DM just ignores the fact that my magic comes from a weird source that's non-understandable. I hate it. I hate it so much. That's why I like playing like bards and sorcerers, because at the end of the day,
You know exactly where
you
it's coming
you
from,
you
and
can't you can't mess with what I can do.
yeah.
Um or you can't forget to interact with what I can do, because there's nothing to interact with really.
Mhm.
But for like wizard, and even to a lesser extent artificer and warlock, like
Or even
these are
paladin, kind of like.
kind of um if you're not interacting with the character as DM, I think you're wasting a huge part of what the class can bring to the table.
Yeah.
Similar to if you have a rogue in your game and not once do you let them interact with the underworld, or you have a ranger and not once do you let them use their abilities to find contacts in that world. Like there's
Utilizing their favorite terrain, or
or like
their
just utilizing
favorite
the fact,
enemy,
well,
whatever.
like most of these classes can kind of co-sign into like certain professions, and not being able to use that's like having a cleric and never letting them interact with a temple or a sect or a god, or a paladin, never letting them interact with an order. Like wizard, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Yes, mechanically it's a bit more in depth and different, and like you might feel as a DM, especially a newer DM, that you're giving
Mhm.
them a one up on everyone else in the party. I can tell you right now,
You're
you are
not.
not.
You're really not.
Because
Because
most of the time they have to spend resources
I was going to say, I
to
think,
even do these things. It's not that they don't get to do them for free.
no, the
Even if they
biggest
get the
caveat
even if they get
is
access to the spells for free, they still have to copy them. They still have to make sure they have a book. They still have to make sure, in most cases, that they have a second spell book in case the first one gets destroyed for whatever reason.
and that's
Like,
more
and
time, more
that's if
resources.
you know that's if you're a DM that will destroy a wizard's spellbook. There are a lot of DMs who just leave it alone.
Yeah.
But like, hey, I don't think there's any harm in it. I think having a more invested DM is huge for a wizard, because look, they're squishy. They don't have a lot of proficiencies in like any physical attributes. Their main thing is the fact that they can cast a wide variety of spells, whether they be damage or utility. Um, there a lot of wizard abilities are not necessarily all encompassing. Uh, They take a while to ramp up, so like kind of limiting a wizard player, I think is a bit shitty.
It does
Because they
a
take
severe
like
disservice, in my
a
opinion.
lot of martial classes, they ramp up relatively quickly once you get to
Oh
the mid
yeah,
game, and
there, there's
they ramp up into the mid game and then they fall off, because that's the fate of martial classes unless you give them a bunch of shit.
unless you get, yeah, unless they get a ton of
But but
magical
like
shit, which,
but like
yeah,
most of the
you
time they
should.
will, and
Yeah.
but that takes effort. Uh, but for like wizards specifically, they are susceptible to a lot of shit until just past mid game, when they go from effective but always on the edge
They're
of being
fragile.
killed.
It's always glass cannon
They're
thing.
glass cannons unless you build them a very specific way. But for the most part, they are exceedingly high risk, high reward.
Hmm.
But once you hit past a certain point in the game, yes, they can still be one shot or two shot by a lot of powerful enemies, but they will unleash ridiculous shit. But
Oh, they'll go ham. They'll go
that's
crazy.
how it works. They're not getting buffs to their health, their AC,
Not really.
abilities that get them out of
They have far
trouble,
less means of doing
similar
so.
to a bard who can wear armor and has some tricksy shit, a sorcerer who can gain natural AC or bend the will of the arcane around them to maybe
Yeah.
remove themselves from danger. Wizards are
Or
a lot more
druids who can
straightforward.
wild shape or
Well,
whatever,
yeah,
like,
we're
and
not
armor.
I'm not counting any of the divine casters here.
Yeah. Who can also heal. Like,
Yeah, like it's a bit different, and so wizards, I think, need that. If you don't have that, I feel like you're doing it a disservice. And
yeah, you're not even playing the full character or the class, even. Like we talked about that before many times, right? About every class deserves to be able to have an opportunity to utilize at the very least, as many of their abilities and features that they can, right? That's why they took the class in the first place. And obviously, the
Yeah.
biggest aspect of the wizards, like to Sammy's point, the thing about wizards, they are different. Yeah. Wizards, even though they probably have the most expansive spell list of any class in the game, like they have the most spells to get, unlike cleric and druid, they do not get to choose all of those spells
No.
at whatever level they're at. They only get a set amount a time. You get two spells. You start out, I think, at level 1, I believe. I'm pretty sure they still kept this. You get I believe what, two or three cantrips, and then you start out, and then you get like first level spells, I believe you start out with.
And
And
you can't
then
prepare all of
no, you can't prepare all of them right away.
them.
Unless you have like really high although and they may have even changed that in the new rules too. I'm blanking on that for now. But anyway, you specifically, again, every level up, you get two spells. You can for free learn two new spells every level up. Other than that, you do not get to choose anything else. So you, again, need to be able to copy down spells from other sources and locations and places. But the caveat with that as well still is
It's the same as it
okay,
was. So
perfect.
you can prepare for um you know six.
Six. Yeah.
You have three
You know
cantrips.
six first level spells and three cantrips. Yeah. And you can prepare four. But again, you in order to learn to scribe down other spells into your spell book, it takes like at least like 150 gold or something like that per level. It's something like that. It's like 50 gold per level and like 2 hours. It's like 50 gold and 2 hours per spell level. So the higher the level of the spell, the more gold and the longer it will take. Like literally at a night to scroll down like a ninth level spell, it's gonna take like what, 18 hours, I think. Because it's 2 times 9, I believe. So yeah, it would take like 18 hours and fucking 9 times 50, uh, which would be 450 gold, I think. Um, and so it's like that the time crunch even is the biggest issue, right? Like I might be wrong about that. Maybe it wouldn't take.
Wait a minute.
Let me see just to be certain here about this because it's some pretty ridiculous amount of time and thing for like wizards to be able to to record and jot down spells, especially again of higher things. For spellcasters, you prepare the list of +1 spells available for your cast. Do so.
2 hours and 50 gold per spell level.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So it would be like, yeah, it would basically be for a ninth level spell, it would take 18 hours. It would take 18 hours and 450 gold.
Yeah, and copying the spells is half the time and a fifth of the gold.
Yeah, so it's still to
It's a
learn
lot.
to learn a brand new ninth level spell, it would take basically an entire day for you, essentially, to do that. So and again, that we're not even talking about that. Even a third level spell would take 6 hours. All right, like that alone is almost like that's almost a full long rest, right? And so you could potentially do that over the course of a long rest. Again, fourth level spells that would be 8 hours. Fifth level spells that's 10 hours. Like it still has that caveat of like they have to use that wisely. They can't just get a scroll and then jot it down, right? And then have that shit. And so it makes it even worse when GM's like, you guys need to be able to make sure that they are having those opportunities at least to have the scroll so that when they do get some downtime, maybe they can start getting more spells and they do have more options because it really does become like a thing of just like, man, as a wizard, that's your thing. You're supposed to be able, or hell, I think me and Sam were talking about this too. Is like another really great aspect is like, let a wizard maybe then create their own spells.
Yeah.
Start working with a wizard to create, because that's the thing. That's how we get so many of these ridiculous, cool other spells like Tinser's floating disc or Liamin's tiny hut or, whatever, like all these other, like the named spells in the game, they came specifically from a original player character coming up with this concept, and then they put it into the actual overarching game. Mordenkainen's, all of Mordenkainen's spells. He was a character that was originally created by Gary Gygax and was therefore able to make all these spells. Like, you can do that in your games too. Have your wizards, as they level up, they get stronger, they become more in touch. Like Sammy said right off the bat, let them begin to shape the weave. That is what true master wizards do. They begin to gain such mastery, control, and imagination of the weave that they are able to start forming. And that's what they did in freaking campaign 2 of Critical Role, right? Matt worked with Liam to have Caleb be able to create his own signature spells. That's amazing. That is an incredible thing that I feel like so many people do not take advantage of with Wizard as a class. It's one of the most cool, amazing classes. Just like in every other class, you need to give it the chance. You need to give it the attention and dedication that it deserves, especially if you have a player who wants to do that. Like, again, if a player isn't really that interested, or a player just wants the baseline, whatever, that's fine. But if a player is like asking you and just like, can I get some spells? I am jazzed up for spells and to really do this thing, like, that should be something you should reward as much as you can. Because it's an amazing thing. Imagine how awesome, how amazingly cool it would be to work with a player to create, and not just the player, again, you as the GM, to create a brand new spell in your world. That would be so cool. And too many people, I think, just they pass up the chance to do it because, yeah, wizards can be really overpowered, like Sammy said, especially at higher levels. Once you get past kind of the midway point, or even, honestly, even at the midway point, wizards start to kind of just take off. And like, if they just take the right spells. But the problem being, though, is that, they do still have to choose. And if they only get limited options, they're probably just going to make very clear choices about what they want to do. Like, the more options you give them, then maybe the less constrained or the less obvious a certain path will be for them to be so crazy or ridiculous in very specific ways. Like, that's again, giving them the option to do that is all a part of being a wizard. It's all a part of that experience, or at least it should be. Because even down here with the comments down below, I really like it. It's like they're asking OP questions and they're responding. It's like one of the top comment goes like, what happens when you try to actively search for spells in game? Like trying to track down a high level wizard to buy spells from, like in a large city, or does the GM just kind of shut you down there too? And OP responds with, there are apparently archmages out there, but I have never seen one ever. In the main town hub we inhabit, I'm the strongest wizard. The second strongest did have some spells up to 3rd level, and it's how I got some spells by trading with them, but I drained their knowledge pretty fast. I could overanalyze the campaign, but I'd be here all day poking holes in discrepancies in world building and yada yada. But the GM is a friend doing their best for free and allowing us to get together weekly or monthly. So, do I get shut down? In short, yes, especially when it comes to stealing. You'd be shocked how many shopkeepers seem to just be a level 30 demigod. And I doubt he has stats for them, but they just seem to pass every roll suspiciously. So that's another thing too. I'm not a huge big fan of like, your party stealing shit and stuff. But at the same token, and there's also something to be said for like, well, maybe if they have a legit reason, I'm also not a huge fan of just making people arbitrarily, capable of seeing through it, right? Just like, well, I don't want you to do this, so I'm going to make this particular shopkeeper, astronomically powerful and capable so that you can't screw with him or screw him over, which is like, well, there's a middle ground there. No, the party shouldn't be stealing left and right, but nor should you just be putting in like, demigod power capable whatever. Another commenter does ask too, like, have you tried blatantly saying to your GM, hey, I am finding it less fun not finding spells to copy. Is there something I can do in character to make this more of a chance? OP responds by saying, well, never that bluntly. More like, any scrolls? I really need some scrolls. Some scrolls for a wizard would be very nice, please. But I am reminded there was an exception for my cheating tax, an unfinished scroll of Crown of Stars. I carried that item for about 2 to 3 effing years, from the first arc of the campaign to basically the 4th or 5th. When I asked if I could learn it for free, they made me roll. I can't remember if I passed or failed, yet I needed a few more rolls each day to piece it together to copy. I know they don't take good notes, and that's when I was already past the cheating event horizon, so after a long break, I just added that shit to my spellbook for free. I did not care. You have to reward a player holding an item for that long. I sort of feel bad airing out the bad of my GM than the good. It's like, again, on some level, I do understand what this guy's talking about because it is the case of just like if a GM is not allowing you to play your character and use your character's abilities, like at what point are you just like, well, can I just start doing it, please? Like, can I just start creating my own spells then, I guess? Like, can I just start? There's another comment that does actually really say this. This is like, not sure about what your edition you're playing, but in many editions, wizards can straight up just research a new spell by spending time and money equivalent to the cost of a scroll of the same level. The fact your GM hasn't mentioned it, though, either means that it isn't a part of the edition you are playing or will be shot down because your GM has some issues, some serious issues with wizards, magic, or you. See, I think that's another thing, too. If you don't want to give the wizard scrolls, the wizard should still be able to just learn these spells themselves as well. I think that's a great way to maybe even a compromise, right? Where you're just like, hey, the wizard can in that case also begin to actively learn the spells they want to learn. The GM doesn't just give them random spells that might not even be really helpful or whatever, because you might already have a lot of the spells that they're going to give you. Like, there are so many ways of getting around this and dealing with this, and I don't necessarily condone him actively cheating, like, but I also can empathize and I can understand. I can very much understand where he's coming from. Because Wizard is also one of my favorite classes, and I know I've experienced this the vast majority as well, where there have been times when I've gotten spells from my GM, and it's like, hey, cool, awesome, great. But then, it was like only like the one time, and there are lower level spells. And as you level up, you want to unlock higher level spells. But
Yeah.
if your GM doesn't give you the opportunity to get some of those cooler, higher level spells, and you're just like, well, you can't just give me more spells of a lower level. Like, that's not, I don't need that. Like, that's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
That kind of, again, that kind of just takes the wind out of your sails. Because you're just like, I already have a lot of the great level 2 or level 1 spells. Like, even again, like OP himself says, like, I don't want to waste one of my 2 spells I get per level up. That's another huge thing. If you're not leveling up very fast, you're not going to get any spells ever. And so if you're going to take a long time to level up, plus you're not even getting the option to get more spells, the other way, like, you're stagnant. You're not actually growing as a character because for wizards, again, they don't need as many magical items really as like, or they don't necessarily benefit as much from magical items as like a fighter or a rogue or a barbarian or any martial class would, right? Or any, like, their bread and butter are their spells.
Yeah.
And if you're not leveling up and you're not giving them more spells, and the wizard just becomes almost like a cage of a class where you're just stuck and stagnant. And let me tell you, being stagnant in almost anything in life is, in my opinion, always the utmost worst thing ever. It sucks. It sucks to just be stuck in the same place with nothing new or nothing different happening. And so
you basically just become like a sorcerer, a bard, or any of the other classes where it's like, I pick 2 spells and I'm done.
And not even that, where it's just because you don't even get the extra feature abilities either. Like, no. So it's like,
you get less because wizards, because they're balanced alongside that, one, having a larger spell list.
Yeah,
2,
the biggest thing is about their versatility. Like, that's what makes a wizard different from a sorcerer. At least that's what they're supposed to say. Wizards just all around better, but the difference is supposed to be sorcerers get less, they're less versatile, but they can be more effective or efficient in what they want, and what they want to do. Whereas wizards are far more versatile and flexible in what they can do. Yeah. But I think we've spent enough time on this one here. Let's go ahead. Let's move on to the next one of the day. Sammy, go ahead and take it away.
The next one I have is A Short-Lived Frozen Endeavor by Equinox 75. This is tagged with lighthearted, so hopefully it stays that way. For
Can only
context,
hope.
I was only in this game for like 5 to 6 sessions. Completely different group than my other posts from before. I joined in a game for Icewind Dale, and the GM told us that one of the players is a friend of theirs, and then everyone else was from different LFG forums or discords. Anyway, we make our characters. There was a half elf fighter, a shifter rogue, a dwarf artificer, a gnome barbarian, and then a dragonborn cleric. That was me. First session started with a creepy dream sequence for
Ooh.
all of the players, involving a strange abomination of eldritch proportions. I thought it was interesting to include that immediately, except the player who knew the GM. They didn't like it at all. So our characters all wake up with with a sense of dread and impending doom and meet up to introduce ourselves and find a job to do. I think it was tracking down a small shipment of raw ore from the next town over, which didn't make it to where it was supposed to. So we venture out, and the session ends with the party finding the general area where the shipment was last seen. The second session I was late for and told the GM ahead of time, and only got to experience the last 20 to 30 minutes, and was informed when I joined that my character almost died twice because the friend of the GM was controlling them and didn't know how to play a cleric. It was definitely a red flag for me. Apparently, they made my character check the snow for the lost shipment by themselves, and I got caught in a hunting trap and got ambushed by goblins who tried to steal the
Mm.
ore. I then asked why they didn't have the rogue check for it, and the rogue player chimed in saying I was going to do that, but they insisted on doing it as your character, and the GM let them. I then asked how we ended up in a cavern fighting kobolds, because that's what was on the screen for Roll20, and the GM loosely explained it, and then the session concluded with us returning the ore shipment to the town, and apparently the party agreed to do some other jobs, which required us to travel around to other towns to complete. So already some
Red
weird decision.
flags, red flag, bro. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Mm-mm. No bueno, no bueno, mi amigo.
The third session involved us traveling to an abandoned cabin outside of another town because of reports of missing villagers and strangers with red glowing eyes seen around the time of each disappearance. Turns out it was a dire lycanthrope bear person who, for some
Jesus.
reason, was connected to the rogue's backstory. And then, after we ended up killing the werebear guy, the rogue's personality went from edgelord to super supportive and happy. Never elaborated as to why. Then, without warning, the friend of the GM started crying because the encounter was, quote, too scary, and then made all the next encounters more tame by comparison. Awesome. The session ended with the party collecting our reward and going to another town across the map.
What is happening? What
I
what are
don't know.
what are we dealing with here?
I don't know.
That threw me for a bit of a loop. I'm not gonna lie. I was
I
not
kind of love
expecting
it.
that.
I kind of love it. For a session, we rolled low on the weather forecast table and got lost in a blizzard trying to get to the next town, and ended up running into a random stone fortress. And the NPCs inside ended up being a part of the artificer's backstory, because they tried to sacrifice them in a ritual to summon some creature from the abyss sometime before, and were using magic to disguise themselves as locals to get more recruits for their ritual. We only figured that out at the end of the session. Anyways, we find an empty room in the fortress to stay in for the night. Then the rogue decided to wake up in the middle of the night and start silently murdering as many guards as possible until they got caught, which ended up being most of them until they failed some stealth checks trying to open a trap door leading to the basement of the building. Eventually, the rest of the party rolled to see if anyone else in the party would wake up to find the rogue missing, and it was my cleric who did. The GM described to us that the remaining NPCs had gathered in the courtyard of the fortress, holding down the rogue, and the leader preparing a big knife with a blood sigil circle for a ritual as the sun rose through the overcast skies, which then started our combat, which is mostly just getting down to the ground, but whatever. We killed a cultist, but in doing so, we caused the ritual we were trying to prevent and ended up fighting a fleshy abyssal creature. And then, wouldn't you know it, the friend of the GM was also not cool with it. After combat, we got our bearings again and traveled to the next town over. The fifth session, we managed to finally track down a murderous NPC who was a chosen of Arul, which wasn't thoroughly explained to me before. I never figured out why that was, but yeah. And then as soon as we did, that massive magical blizzard descended down upon our location. Not because the GM had intended it for it I had intended for it to happen, but because the player who was the fighter said, "Huh, that's weird. Why is nothing happening? We just killed the chosen of rule." The GM reacted with the weather change. We braced for impact by running into the nearest open house and waited out the storm. And I don't think there was much else to deal with. And after that, we continued on with the next job. After that, I decided to quit the group and move on because I didn't feel like getting railroaded by an easily squeamish player. I found out from one of the players on Discord about 7 months later that the game fell apart not long after that. Not because I was gone, but because the friend of the GM got too scared to continue with the campaign, and so the GM left as well. But they did try to
Oh,
make it work after that with the three remaining players, but eventually scheduling changes separated them from each other, and that was that. TLDR, don't let friends drag down your campaign because they're not prepared for the theme of the game in the first place. And communicate with everyone else joining that your intentions are for the game, or what your intentions are for the game, especially if you've never met them before.
good. God damn.
So,
That
so
is.
I've tried to run, I've run games that are a bit more graphic, a bit
Yeah, maybe like body
uns
horror-esque,
well,
like
yeah.
kind of like,
Actually, currently in my Abyss camp,
grotesque.
yeah, in my Abyss campaign that I'm running, there is a common theme of this weird creature made out of thousands of tiny worms that has been tormenting the party during certain long rests. And I had one party member who actually, because of the interaction, ended up gaining a permanent fear. Because the especially the reason being is that in Out of the Abyss there is a madness mechanic,
Hmm.
and the madness mechanic depends on two things. Either you enter an area of Physirness, which is like weird Underdark bullshit, or you have an encounter that's weird and not understandable, not
Yep.
you can't comprehend
Breaks
why.
your mind a little bit.
And so I've been using this weird creature as a reminder that shit can get weird down here and it can cause permanent issues.
You need to be careful.
Yeah. And I don't think they've really figured out that it's following them or if it's the same creature. I don't know. But it's fun for me because I love the weird horror of not knowing what's in the dark and that causing issues. And so,
I
it's
mean,
nothing like too bad. I haven't done anything to the point where it's like
yeah, I mean,
detrimental to an extreme.
I was gonna say, I think like this, there's obviously always a middle ground with these, right? Because we have seen plenty of stories where people go 100% maybe a bit too far with extremely explicit or graphic details about
Yeah, I'm not
shit
doing
that's
that.
like you don't necessarily need to go that hard, like at least depending on the context of what you're talking about. But for stuff like this where you're just like you're fighting a nasty ugly creature, but you are actively fighting it, like yeah, you should be able to give great description that should grip and move and affect your players. That I feel like are the hallmarks of great DMing and storytelling. I mean, hell, that's you want that to happen.
Yeah.
And the fact that this, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm gonna be honest. I'm just gonna be straight honest with this.
Puss.
This player, yeah, this player sounds like a bit of a bitch, a bit of a wussy ass motherfucker. I'm not gonna lie. All right, I'm just gonna say it as it is. It's just it's too much. It's like, come on, man, really, really. Like
This
it
is
was
what
just
gets you?
all he did was talk about a strange abomination of eldritch proportions. Like, and it was like,
Yeah.
like, come on, bro,
I
come
was
on.
thinking, I see one of my
You
hobbies.
can't even actually see it. Get your
Yeah.
shit together,
Well,
bro.
see, that's
Like,
the funny thing, Adam, is like I hate horror movies. I feel like we've talked about this before. One of my
I'm
hobbies,
not a huge
though,
fan of horror movies either.
one of my hobbies, despite not liking horror movies, is I listen to horror audio drama podcasts. I'm not talking about creepypasta stories. I'm talking about fully fleshed out
Mm-hmm.
lore and weird fucked up shit in like contemporary fantasy settings where it's like,
Yep.
people are getting like fucking ripped apart. There's
Yep.
weird beings that are like invading people's minds and
Doing all
tearing their
kind of
eyes
just
out.
crazy
And but
shit.
like
Yeah.
but this is studio like audio designed to make you feel unsettled via sound effects, stories, events that are happening. You can't see it, but I love that because I get to
Imagine it.
visualize.
Yeah. You get
And
to really
that to
picture it
me
yourself.
has been my favorite example of horror. I've always loved contemporary fantasy, and reading those books, and now I get to experience it in a different medium
Mhm.
with a dark side to it. And that's where I draw a lot of my horror, you
Inspiration.
know, inspiration for D&D, um in the weird unknown and the things that make you unsettled. And like it's not for everyone, but man, it like if you can't deal, I mean
I
like
mean,
obviously
and
uh,
what I'm saying is, it doesn't even sound like the GM was going that hard by all standards of
no,
measurement. Like I'm
no,
so like, it sounds to me again, at least based off of the description that OP said, you're just kind of being a little bit of a bitch. You're just being a punk. It's like stop being such a wuss. Like, come on, man. Like, here's the thing. I am all for if like some shit is like legitimately kind of like dark or like
yeah,
messed up. Like maybe you're like, I mean, if you're gonna start describing how like a monster maybe starts like tearing apart children, like super graphically or like that, that would be like, okay, maybe we don't need to hear all about that. Like
you don't
that's,
have to do stuff like that to make people
yeah,
unsettled.
that's pretty dark. Like that's just you're clearly utilizing a very specific thing that's like, so you
You're
don't
trying
necessarily,
to, yeah,
yeah, that's just a straight effed up kind of situation where it's like, um but I mean, if you're talking about, again, just like there is a grotesque, sickly, like maggot infested, what looks to be almost like a carcass standing in front of you. It's not even a true carcass. It's almost a mass, an amalgamation of just rotten pustules of flesh and writhing mass of flesh in front of you that somehow seems to congeal into a anatomous bipedal form. Like if you just, again, you're just using words to describe in a very, sick, like you're seeing something just like, whoa, like,
whoa, whoa,
but
whoa.
it's a monster that you're fighting. It's like, yeah, it's supposed to unsettle you. That is the point. It's supposed to be kind of scary and freaky. Your players and your characters, by extension, should be affected. Like, but because again, that's the whole reason you're adventurers. You're supposed to fight crazy evil shit like this or whatever. You're one of the few people who should be able to, but it's not like you're gonna necessarily not even be affected by it at all. Like, and to be fair, maybe I am being a bit harsh and a bit hard. Like, if people are particularly squeamish or uh, have rather softer dispositions toward things, that's not a bad thing necessarily. Yeah, it's just clearly maybe not the campaign for you. Like kind of OP says at the bottom, but that friend should have been aware off the cuff, like, or at jump, this is the kind of campaign it's going to be. This is more of kind of an eldritch horror-esque kind of thing. And you need to be okay with that if you want to participate in this campaign. Otherwise, you got to deal with it, handle it. If you want to be part of this, and handle it. Or be like, you know what? I don't think this is really for me, so I'm gonna go ahead and dip out. Sorry about that. I don't think it's great for me. Like, and not even just that. Like, let's talk about for a minute how their GM is saying like somebody else is gonna control that player character for that session, and then almost gets them killed specifically. Like that. That's always a slippery slope too. Like that's a big thing where you're like, I get it because I'm not against that necessarily. It's like, hey, if you're in the middle of a fight, a player maybe can't make it that week. Well, sometimes you still got to continue on without people. Cool. Then let I would say maybe even have the GM control them. Uh or maybe not if the GM doesn't want to. Yeah, let another player control that other character if you have the access to their sheet. But like you can't make them do dangerous shit intentionally, bro. That's fucked up. That's messed up. Like again, if the player isn't here to make certain checks or things that could be potentially risky, don't do it. Just have one of the other players do it. Have the rogue do it. I feel like there's something that stank about that whole thing there where they're just like, yeah, I had your cleric go check in da 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 da, even though the rogue wanted to, but I insist that the cleric should go do it. And I get the feeling it's like, well, the cleric isn't here, so technically nobody's risking their lives right now, right? Because the cleric's not here, so it won't matter as much. And that's a messed up way of thinking. And again, all around it, I feel like the GM's friend was just an absolute troglodyte douchebag here. Like just and douchebag by means of kind of just being a bitch. He was kind of just a bitch. He's kind of just acting bitch made. I'm sorry to say it. He's kind of just acting bitch made right now. And I'm not a huge fan of that myself. It's just like, come on, bro. You should be better than that. Um, but yeah, I think with that, we've said kind of all we can say about this one. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one of the day, shall we? Now, this one is definitely one that both me and Sammy were very interested and excited to talk about and to read because this is actually something that I personally have probably a pretty close tie in relation to in a lot of ways. This story is titled "Former Paid GM Here Was One of the Worst Jobs I Had" by Kind Emu 8089. TLDR, I used to be a paid dungeon master. I quit. I have a much better job now and a great game with in-person friends where I am not their employee. Posting this here on a spare account. Not sure if this is the best place, as the horror in this story mostly revolves around just doing a sucky job. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I decided that I wanted to write and post it for my own benefit. So, a little bit about me and how I got into paid GMing. I GM'd D&D 5e since it came out in 2014. Around 2018, I started doing paid GMing. I eventually joined Start Playing Games, the biggest site to find paid GMs. I did pro GMing for about 4 to 5 years with breaks in between, and near the end of this time, I got married and started a family, which I needed to support. Why did I do paid GMing? Money. That's pretty much it. Short, sweet, and simple. At the time, I was a PhD student. My stipend was meager, about 18K, and eventually even that money ran out. I had to adjunct while writing my dissertation and doing paid GMing. Now, at my peak, I had about 3 tables with 4 to 5 people each paying $25 per player for a 3-hour session. That's pretty decent, actually. That's pretty good. Lots of people balk at the idea of paid GMing. They do, which is, I don't really see why they have such a thing about it. But to be honest, these folks don't understand that paid D&D is a luxury product. It is not, unfortunately, aimed at working/middle class folks, especially not teenagers. This is true. Anyone who argues that paid GMing does not create some type of equity issue is honestly kidding themselves. The GM themselves usually does not earn very much. I think at most 1 year I earned about 8K. I'm sure others probably earned more. I've heard of some exceptional cases of some GMs earning up to 6 figures, but these are definitely the exception. They are, but again, it is possible. There are, hell, me and Sammy could be considered probably like D&D fiends, right? There are plenty of people who are just salivating, thirsty for a game, consistent game, especially if it's one where maybe you might even have some creative, input, liberties or whatever, flexibility. Like some people will absolutely pay like 50, 60, maybe even hundreds of dollars sometimes to do such things. So why did I quit? The answer is simple. I got a better job, more money, and with benefits. I completed my dissertation. It took me a long time because of all the work, and now I have a tenure track job. Why was the job so bad? Lots of reasons, and I've had lots of shitty jobs in the past. Now, my worst job, if you can call it that, was donating plasma at Octapharma. Others included tutoring home insecure youths, working at a freight warehouse, unloading and loading cargo, and even dressing up as Paw Patrol characters for rich kids' birthday parties. Hey man, this guy's a regular fucking what do they call those dudes who have like the many different jobs and skills? I'm blanking on the term. I know
Jack
there's a
of all
term.
trades.
Yeah, we can do that. Regular jack of all trades, shall we say? Still, I would say paid jamming was arguably the second worst job I've ever had. Only selling plasma was worse for me. I will list a few of the big reasons as to why the job sucked here. The pay. This should be obvious from what I stated above, but the pay was bad. Some GMs can charge more than $25 per seat, but I personally never broke that threshold. Most paid GMs don't. Note, you are not an employee of Start Playing Games if you work there. You don't get any benefits or protections. It really is just a platform for you to promote yourself. Yeah, very much so. If you're lucky, then a lot of your tables will have the same official D&D module as its base. So hopefully you won't spend more than 30 minutes to 1 hour prepping per game hour. But remember that most players are paying for a custom-made and tailored experience. So even if you use a pre-made module, you better incorporate their backstory into the campaign. A lot. Difficulty establishing yourself. Most players will not play with a rando, even if you have great reviews. Establishing and promoting yourself is a lot of work, and it can be demoralizing as you essentially sell yourself to strangers. I will give it to Start Playing Games here. They definitely helped immensely. They are worth the 10% cut they take. There you go. Burnout. I began to despise D&D. People are paying you for a game, so you better believe they expect a great game and to be entertained. There is a lot of pressure to perform, and there were definitely many times where I did not want to run the session, but I needed the money to eat. The players. Most of the players I played with were great, but to be honest, many were annoying or just downright toxic to my mental health at times. I have a lot of RPG horror stories of Mary Sue characters, edgelords, and chaotic goblins that I won't share here right now. Still, I was in no position to turn them down a lot of the time because, again, you guessed it, I needed the money. I mentioned this before, but the target clientele for these paid games are affluent Westerners with disposable income that won't balk at the idea of spending $25 for a game. Many, if not most, of my clients worked in high-paying professions, such as being lawyers, or even had their own company. Even if they were cool, it was often very hard to connect with them outside the game when I was so poor in comparison, because players telling me how they traveled for a vacation and went skiing or snowboarding felt pretty odd. I'm also a person of color, and nearly all my clients were white. This, not always though, but often did create another obstacle for me to relate to them. Blurred relationships. As a paid GM, I did have a fiduciary duty to help develop a high quality, entertaining, and reliable game. Now, I understand that, of course. I was essentially my client's employee. However, things would get weird when many of these clients of mine wanted to then be my friend and invite me to visit them across the world/nation. And while I was friendly with them, I never actually wanted to be friends with, well, most of them. Having to politely decline their invitations without hurting their feelings and thus having them replace me with another paid GM was awkward, to say the least. Also, this would hardly ever happen, but there were a few more times when a player would get mad in session over their character being killed/harmed. Oh my goodness. During these times, the power dynamics are all sorts of messed up as I had to be fair to myself and my client players. And again, I still needed the money, so I couldn't just tell them to take a hike if they didn't accept my ruling. The other paid GMs. As mentioned, I joined Start Playing Games and even joined their Discord for GMs. Some of the other GMs were super cool and definitely down to earth. But good lord, some of them were so goddamn pretentious. And to be fair, I can be pretentious at times too. I suspect you need to be a little pretentious to think you're worthy of people paying you money to play games with them online, after all. I digress, however. But man, their Discord server would always go off with some intense argument about AI, D&D versus PFE2 or PF2E or some other niche topic. It is safe to say that they have a loud and vocal minority group that can't stop arguing. Moreover, I did experience a lot of smug gatekeeping on there. And I guess I can't blame them too much. I mean, we are competing for the same type of rich clientele, you know? And from what I gathered, many paid GMs were in a similar boat to me. Quite poor, needed money, or had some disability in which this was one of the few jobs they could actually do. It can be a little cutthroat out there, and there is immense competition and pressure to make sure your thumbnail and game stand out. There were even times GMs accused other GMs of poaching/stealing their players. I had to take a break from their Discord a lot because even though it was sometimes a fascinating car crash to watch, it wasn't healthy for my mind. I won't name any specific toxic DMs, so don't ask me to. Conclusion. So, to conclude, I do recommend you try paid GMing as a side gig. Or, sorry, do I recommend you try paid GMing as a side gig? No, not really. I don't think most people can handle it mentally. But hey, maybe you're an exception. If you think so, go for it. Still, I suspect paid GMing was better than other paid side gigs like driving Uber or whatever. But it is definitely not better than most stable jobs that treat you as an employee as opposed to an independent contractor. Well, I think that is all I wanted to say. Surprisingly, I do feel better writing this out and sharing it. I don't know if I will bother responding to any of the comments, but I do hope this informs anyone out there who is curious about the job. Currently, I have a much better job and have an in-person game that I GM for free with new friends that is approaching a year now. I can honestly say that I haven't enjoyed D&D this much in years. Happy gaming, everybody. Quick edit. Thanks to everyone who took the time to read this. I know time and attention are a precious commodity nowadays. Your comments have been very supportive and validating, which I appreciate. A few notes. One, to my current paid GMs who commented about their great experiences, good for you. Congrats. I'm glad it's working out for you. I consider you to be the exception in both your circumstances and personality. Your experience is valid, and just as I wouldn't want anyone to invalidate my experience, I wouldn't want to invalidate yours. That's not what this post is meant to do, and I'm sure you can see that. Number two, it's not surprising that this made it to the SPG Discord and game chat. I'm not surprised that some on there were negative and not empathetic. See loud and pretentious vocal minority above. But I was surprised that many took the time to empathize and reflect on their own experience. To those working slash middle class pay GMs that did, I empathize with you as well. I mean, how can I not? I was in your shoes for a long time, and I wish you the best as well. Number three, some have mentioned if this would have been different if I ran a system different from 5e. I don't know, to be honest. I like 5e still, but I do have some major gripes with it. Currently trying out other systems and enjoying them. Number four, for what it's worth, I consider my time as a paid GM to be a success. I knew this was a job slash part-time slash side gig slash small business slash thing I did for money, whatever you want to call it, while simultaneously working multiple other better jobs and working on my PhD. The goal was always to make a little more money, get the PhD, and get a better job so I wouldn't have to do this anymore. And I achieved that. Number five, if after all this you still want to try paid GMing, I encourage you to ask yourself, what does success as a paid GM look like for me, both financially and psychologically? Hope this helps, and thanks again for all the positive feedback. It has, quite surprisingly, been very validating. End post. So, right off the bat, I mean, I know I have plenty I can kind of say about this, but right off the bat, what do you feel about this one, Sammy?
Well, so I've never done a paid GM event or participated in anything like that. Um, at my job currently, every like third Wednesday, we have a group or a paid DM that comes in for Drinking and Dragons. You pay a fee, you get to play the game, you get and like part of the fee is everyone gets a drink. They do a little thing where you like roll a die and you get a random drink based on your roll, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And
Fun.
according to my bosses, who are both, well, one of them's on the creative theater side, just things like
Okay.
choir, plays, stuff
Hmm.
like that when they were in high school. The other one's more of a nerd, does video games. Like we've talked about D&D and stuff like that. Like I get it. And according to them, like they've had success and like the people who go seem to enjoy it. And they're not the only, like I work at a distillery. There's a brewery nearby that also does it. And like
That's
it's
pretty
cool.
cool,
I like
honestly.
the
Yeah.
concept. Like it's fun. As someone who enjoys D&D, it's something that like I'm glad people are getting that opportunity.
Yeah.
Me
Try it.
personally, me personally, I don't think I'd ever do it. Um,
Uh-huh.
unless I was like really desperate.
Just
Because
for something.
well, I'm not a and I'm assuming in a lot of paid GM situations where it's like in person, um, where you're like meeting people, getting their characters if they're not pre-written, which I think most of the ones in these situations are. You're going by most likely some variation of Adventurers League rules where you're a bit limited on your decisions,
Hmm.
et cetera, just to make things go smoothly. That sounds fun. Um, for me, not so much. Um, but like it is an opportunity to try something out at, I think, for most people, a decently low expense if you're not going like every time.
Yeah.
If it's something like it's if you're like, hey, I want to play D&D. I don't have anybody to play with, or I need to convince my friends to play with me, but maybe in the meantime I can get some experience playing. Because Adventures Leagues cost money. Anything you're gonna find advertised is gonna cost some amount of money. And I think for the ones that I know of, it's through like a company. They,
Mhm.
this is they're sending people that like work for them. I don't know if they're independent contractors. I have no idea about the specifics, but there is an advantage to having someone who knows what they're doing, who can streamline stuff. Um,
It's true.
but it's not like you're gonna know what type of game it is. There's downsides to it. But you're also in a public setting. You know, nothing can be too fucked up or weird because you're in public. You're not at a gaming store. You're at, a bar or whatever, where like if shit goes weird, like people are not gonna be cool with that. So I'm assuming there's a
Yeah.
level of professionalism that is gonna be different than say joining an online game or sitting in an LFG forum.
Depends. There are
You'd
some
hope
legitimately degenerate individuals, but yes.
you'd hope, especially if they're being supported by some sort of organization or event that
Yeah.
is like advertised, that
You'd
these
hope
people
there'd be
aren't.
some
Well,
like guidelines or,
I guess
restrictions.
the reality is, right, if you had someone who's problematic doing that, they wouldn't be able to continue advertising it. There'd be enough people that'd be like, this is fucking terrible. Don't
Mm.
do this. Like telling the business themselves, hey, don't let this guy come back. Um, so like I love the idea. And I've seen like a lot more small breweries, local places, distilleries do stuff like this, which I love because D&D has gotten a lot bigger since I started playing.
Yep,
Um,
same.
so I love, and I've had people come in, look at the poster, and be like, "What's that about?" I'm like, "Well, have you ever played it before?" And I'm sitting
Yeah.
there now talking to customers for like an hour about D&D because
Mm-hmm.
I'm a lot more experienced than anyone else at my job.
Yep.
Um, selling this idea, not necessarily coming in for our events, but just in general. Um, I think overall it could be a positive experience. I could definitely like making something that is a hobby that you are passionate about into a job always has its downsides.
Yeah.
Always, 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 always.
Yep.
And like for me, I make cocktails for a living a couple days a week. And like that's something that I had a lot of passion about outside of making money for it because I was in a space where I could learn about it without necessarily relying on it. Um, but there are downsides. Taking something that you love and you have genuine interest in and making it something you do for money can either be super awesome and helpful in the sense that you now have support, the ability to be more creative, the ability to express those interests without it being detrimental to your everyday life because now there is a income that can support that. But at the same time, if that's not like a stable income, but you're spending a lot of time on it, it can be detrimental to your passion. It's a very tricky balancing act. And obviously you have experience doing paid DMing. I don't think I could ever. I don't have the confidence in myself to meet a bunch of strangers, run a game, and be like, yeah, this was definitely worth the money. Because I've run stuff for strangers or like friends of friends or little one shots for people that haven't played or they want to try playing, and I think I did okay. I think they enjoyed it, but
Mm-hmm.
in no terms, there's never been a time where I was like, yeah, I'd charge money for this. And you know what? If you're that confident and experienced that you think you can make a concise story conducive playing atmosphere that you think it's worth money and you have the experience and people have told you, yeah, you should do this, 100% there's nothing wrong with that. And if anything, don't treat it as a job. Maybe treat it as like, well, twice a month I go do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I put in a couple hours of work for 2 weeks and I go run this. Throw in like it's all it's pre-generated characters or like you could change a couple things, but like don't have the expectation that your characters are going to have this long-winded backstory that ropes into the game. If you're doing it in such a way where you're like, I get to hang out with people and be passionate and have some fun, it's not deep, it's not this overarching crazy story you're trying to tell. It's simple stuff. I think, you could do that in such a way that it can be a hobby. You can still be passionate about it and play your own games, but twice a month on like a Sunday or a Wednesday when you don't have like your normal job or normal expectations, you make some pocket change and enjoy a hobby that you have, 100% awesome. But that's like if you're a DM. if you're a player that like wants to try DMing, God, never do this unless you've
I
been
mean,
DMing
no.
for a
Yeah.
long period of time and like that's you prefer DMing.
Yeah.
I have a lot of people like most like my one of my DMs is the forever DM because he prefers DMing to playing. Another one
Yeah,
of my
that's
DMs,
fair.
he likes DMing, but he
But
is
he prefers
equally well, no, he
playing.
is equally ready to play.
I
But
got you.
like,
Okay.
you know,
He's more of a balanced act. Okay,
yeah.
I got you.
But my first DM, this is something that I think he could do.
Yeah.
If he wanted to. He's way too busy to do it with his current job and all that. But like
Yeah.
say,
But he has the
in
passion, the drive to
that's what I
really
mean.
make
Like
it.
say
Yeah.
in 20 years or 30 years, he retires or goes down to part-time whatever, and he wants to spend 2 days, 3 days a month where he runs some like low level one shot adventures for random people at a bar because he likes introducing people or likes seeing people have fun with this. He could 100% do it.
Mhm.
Um, he has the experience to do it. On the other hand, no. I'm still trying to figure out how the hell I run an actual one shot where it goes from beginning to end in 1 3 hour 4 hour session.
Well, what's
I
funny
still have
about
not figured
that?
that out.
I was what's ironically funny about that is on one shots are honestly almost even harder than long form campaigns. Like they are,
100%.
in my opinion, like they because like you just said, it's much harder to have just the full, I guess, not just narrative. Like you could probably come up with a pretty easy narrative for a one shot in a day, like pretty straightforward if you keep it simple. The obviously issue being though is the execution, where you're just like you're on an actual clear timetable of like, okay, how do I get the party to from point A to B to then the final one being C? Because normally you want to have the that 3 act structure of beginning, middle, and then the finale, the climax at the end. Um, and it's often very difficult to get there with how D&D usually kind of just ends up going. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree with a lot of what you're saying, and I will say, like, from my experience personally, I specifically when I was kind of doing it more professionally, um, I did it first kind of as like being a part of a company that was doing it. It was a specific company that I was a part of that had like both theater as well as other things going on, but they ended up creating a D&D branch too now that they wanted to utilize and capitalize on the sudden explosion of popularity for D&D. And so I signed up as a professional GM. You had to actually audition for it. And I luckily made the cut and I got on there and essentially they were willing to pay us $50 for, I believe it was like 4 hour session, maybe like basically once a week. So once I was signed up for once a week, or maybe it was twice a week, I forget. Um, it may have been twice a week even
I mean,
actually.
that's
Where
that's that's
and
$12 an hour for a
yes,
four
no,
hour session,
believe me, there was a
not
reason.
including the prep time.
Not including the prep time. Like again, believe me, there was a reason why I quit because it was definitely
Yes.
it
So you
was
spend
not
2 hours prepping, it's $8 an hour.
it was not great. Because well, luckily with the prep time, technically, they the way that they had the format set up was they a lot like their primary GMs or whatever would create, we would either use parts and bits from established modules of D&D 5e, or they would create their own, homebrew narratives that again had basically that 3 act structure where you'd have the introduction of characters and maybe one of the first initial encounters, some role play. You'd be in the center, get a little bit more role play, maybe have another encounter. Maybe it would be more like the rest phase, the downtime phase, and then you'd have the ending phase or the climax where you'd get that climactic boss battle with whatever enemy was the boss of that particular module or whatever they were doing, and yada yada. And so like we didn't necessarily have to do a lot of story prep because we didn't make our own. They had a lot of just pre-created, pre-established stuff that we utilized. We utilized it on Roll20. But a lot of the prep actually came specifically from how we were trying to manage all of these players' character sheets because they had to literally join like a website where we as GMs would then have to prep, take their character sheets, add them in, see if there's the right one for them. We had to do all of this really just very aggravating, annoying, time-consuming shit.
Monotonous.
Very monotonous. And it was also not, particularly well structured, especially because it was brand new and they were still figuring a lot of things out. But that did take hours sometimes, where you're just like, you're sitting there because you also, at the end of a session, depending on what the characters did, what they got, some of them may have gotten certain items, some of them may have gotten, everybody would get gold or whatever, and then you, the GM, would have to manually put that in yourself. You couldn't, the players were not allowed to do that. The players were not allowed to mess with their own sheets and stuff, obviously, to try and keep it fair, because how it worked is that they would pay a certain amount of money to gain like a certain amount of, I guess, spending ability to join certain modules in games, and then they also were able to like increase their levels as they would go. The more games they played, the more experience they would get, and then they would level up, so on and so forth. And the structure again was just again, it was brand new, and so I can give them a lot of kind of slack or leeway because they were still trying to figure out. I don't know if it's still going on at the moment or how much they've changed. I know they've changed a lot, but I haven't checked in with them for a long time. But it definitely was like it was a lot. And obviously the compensation was not nearly enough to justify it for certain. Um, as well as the fact that, like, I will say there were some plenty of really great moments in the game. It was fun. I enjoyed GMing. I enjoyed being able to kind of do things, and there were plenty of players who like had a lot of fun. It was cool seeing them, and you got to kind of experience like a new group every week, essentially. Or sometimes you get some reoccurring players if they liked you and they would come back for another thing. It'd be great to see them. But there also were, because of the format and the way it was set up, there were plenty of other players, or you get new players, and there were plenty of opportunity, just statistically speaking, to kind of get some assholes. And there were plenty of people who inevitably you might start butting heads with a bit, even as the GM. It's just like, especially again, like OP states here, the biggest issue with the dynamic or the concept of paid GMing or D&D is when the GM does become a so-called employee, or becomes again almost again to a very real extent beholden to the players, even though the GM is supposed to kind of be the final word, the final say on what happens. They're supposed to be the arbitrator. They're supposed to be the rule setter. And so it's a bit different. It becomes kind of a slippery slope or a bit murky when it's like, okay, this individual who is supposed to have the final say, what they say is law, that's just how it goes, is now kind of, though, beholden to the players that they have to kind of manage better, because they have paid them for a service now. And so, like OP says, it's like you don't necessarily want to offend or screw up or harm or whatever anybody, because that could potentially cost you a revenue spot or revenue stream, or even for whatever else, review bomb or whatever the hell else happens, and it's just like, and just from the very nature of D&D as a game, and as humans being humans, especially if you are cycling out a lot of people and meeting different people, statistically, you're going to come across plenty of people who you are going to just kind of disagree with. You're going to butt heads with, who are going to try and maybe cheat, maybe screw around with the game, become those guys, them guys, that's guys that we read about all the time here on Cautionary Chronicles of the Arcane Archive. It's like and so it becomes a bit like OP says, there's some toxicity, and it becomes stressful, and it becomes there's pressure, and it's that's not necessarily automatically bad. Having stress or pressure can sometimes compel you to rise above and do your best, right? To overcome and to really strive to achieve the best you can. But there is absolutely, as with everything, a limit and a line. There's a balance to be had. And more often than not, in stuff like this, eventually you do start to get burnout. Like, especially if it's shit where you're just like, you can't even really, express or do the things you really want to do. You can't really maybe switch things up creatively, because again, you're always kind of beholden and under the expectation of delivering a specific product that the customer paid for. Um, but on the other hand, I also did do it like a little bit um, after I resigned from that job because there was just too much about it that just was not truly worth it, in my opinion. It was not after a relatively short time, it was not as fulfilling as I wanted it to be, specifically due to a lot of the restrictions. A lot of the players started to kind of become like, I think a number of players kind of fell off after a little while. And a lot of the ones that stayed were a lot of the ones that kind of just were constantly trying to like gank the system, cheat with a certain amount of like the way that the level up system that they were running worked, a lot of the ways that just all kinds of stuff. And just wasn't really fun or stimulating as much anymore. I got a lot of what I needed out of it, and it kind of was just no longer, providing me with anything. And especially, again, the monetary compensation obviously was never really a factor for me. That whole thing was much more about experience for me more than anything else. And it definitely provided that. But obviously, up to a certain extent, you no longer can even really get more truly productive and constructive experience from something. Eventually, it just starts to become destructive and harmful or toxic. I resigned. And from there, then I did do a couple of other like brief, attempts at like one shots, paid one shots here or there and some other stuff that it went okay. It still just wasn't really what I wanted to do. And I will say, like for me, I will say to Sammy's point before, I do think I prefer to be a player. Like I like GMing, like I like being able to have those moments because I have, I really like being able to provide the experience that I would like to have for player as a player, like for other people and for players. I love like we were talking about before. I love to give wizards the chance to make their own spells and do this thing. I love the opportunity to maybe even run some really cool badass monsters and DMC or DMPC evil give characters and stuff for players. But I definitely think that overall my interest and passion does lie more so with playing rather than GMing for myself. But I definitely feel for the OP here. And OP, if you ever find and see this video, I'm right there with you, brother. Like I've been there before, especially when you needed the money. And what you say again about, yeah, the biggest issue with this whole concept is the GM being beholden to the players, or having that kind of responsibility or obligation. It kind of muddies things up a lot, which is unfortunate. Which is why, yeah, like you said though, I have seen plenty of GMs that it works for them. They have a great time. They have a great reoccurring group of people where they're still paying money for it, and it's working out well for them. I knew a number of GMs who did great with that. Who again charged, even more than $25. Like a lot of GMs I've seen on, start playing games, like they charge like 50 to 60 bucks. A lot like he says most don't go over 25, but I've seen plenty that do, and I'm pretty sure they get probably plenty of players. So yeah, it really is like you said, what are you wanting to get out of the game? Like to Sammy's point about, his GM friend, like if you are a person who loves to just who gets a particular just that special kind of hit, that special kind of dopamine hit by, making this world, being a GM, go for it. You can make some extra cash on the side. Like, yeah, 100%. Even if you only charge like 15 bucks per person. Again, you get, 5 people. That would be what? $75 right there for like 2 hours. You get 5 people, charge 15 bucks for 2 hours of work, basically. Not even work, because again, depending on how fun you make it, like that's still 75 bucks you made in 2 hours.
I mean, there's even, independent, there's also like the
Yeah.
fact that a lot of the stuff you were talking about was like week to week or like people that were coming back. My experience with the paid gymming stuff is like it's like new groups all the time. Or some of the same people come back, but they're
I
playing
did that
new
a lot too.
characters,
Yeah.
different stories, whatever. I think there might be an idea or a market for someone that wants to do DMing and they're doing it like, say they're doing it like online, right? Where
Mhm.
they have to use something like Roll20 or D&D Beyond or above VTT, like, one of these like virtual tabletops, and like they're using Discord. I think there might be a market for, you want to run a game. You want it to be, maybe long term or like maybe a couple months, but you don't have the upfront cash to maybe pay for subscriptions or tools that would make it easier to run a game online. There might be a market for, hey, I want to run a game. I have experience in this, or maybe I don't. But like, if everyone can throw down $5, $10, a month, or like we'll play like 3, 4 times a month, and could you throw down like $30 for the whole 6 months to just pay for the services, not necessarily like what you want to make off of it, but to pay for things like a book or a VTT or things that like you don't have necessarily the money to just spend on. You might need a little bit of help getting there, but something that you still want to do is like a hobby, but you don't have the
The
financial resources
resources
to just
to,
spend on like Roll20
yeah,
or
to
spend
to
on
to
something.
up your game, so to
Yeah,
speak, to the
and
next
like
level.
I think playing the games I've played, and running, like I had times where I was unemployed or had issues, and I basically brought to the table. I was like, hey, I've spent money on this kind of stuff. I need a little bit of assistance to make ends meet, so we can keep using the resources that I've paid for or that we're used to. And you know what? If it's from an angle of I don't want to do this as a job, but I need people to kind of put in to make sure this still works, is also, I think, a valid way to do it. Because obviously, you can pirate it, I don't encourage it, but you can pirate anything,
Yeah.
especially TTRPG stuff. You can get a lot of things just in
Just,
PDF formats
yeah, for
off the internet.
free.
I
Yep.
again,
Don't condone
not
it.
in, don't condone it,
We
not
here at the Arcane
encourage.
Archive do not condone
No,
piracy or theft of any
uh,
kind or
I
whatever,
I don't, for
but
D&D and stuff like that, I don't do it. Mostly because I want to continue as a valid hobby.
hmm.
I know there are a lot of people who don't want to pay for new stuff or don't want to do that, and that's fine. Do your own thing. For me,
Won't judge it, but
for
don't condone it either,
yeah, but like I play 5e mostly, and
Hmm.
I have paid on D&D Beyond for, and I'm not endorsing them, but I've paid for all of almost most of the books. There's a couple books I don't have,
Yep,
but
same.
I've paid for pretty much all of it. And
Same.
over the years, over the 6 years that I've been playing with my group, that adds up. It's almost a grand, over the course of time of like subscriptions and paying for the books and all this stuff. And now, we've played 2E where we're on Foundry, and my other DM paid for a bunch of stuff on there so that we could have access to everything. That money adds up. If you're buying map makers, if you're buying maps online, a lot of it
Paying for
you
a map
can,
subscription like Jay and Pecky,
yeah,
like,
you can get a lot of stuff for free. A lot of people will make stuff and offer it as like pay as you can.
hmm.
But, you know, if you're with a group and you want to up your game and stuff like that, I don't think there's any harm in being like, hey, I'm going to commit myself to this. I'm going to commit myself to running this game for a group. But if we're going to do that, I'd like the people in the group. Maybe we play like 1, 2, 3 sessions to get introduced to everybody. And if you like it and you want to stick around, hey, can you throw me some cash
Yeah, just
to
a
to
little bit
make
of, a
to
little bit
make
of
ends meet
financial support.
for upping our game, for making
Yep.
sure we have access to things we all want. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think, the paid DM thing can be a bit much for the average person, both paying for it or charging it. So I think there's middle grounds there too.
100%. There always are. And
Yeah.
like, again, it really is just, again, about, I mean, hell, it's the same aspect as any so-called career or future or job that you ever want to get into, right? It really is just about how much you love to do it, and specifically not even, no, I should take it back. It's not just about how much you love to do it, but it's about what specifically, what aspects of it that you love. Because that I think are those are the defining factors on whether or not you can really able to so-called monetize it, right? Why do you love this thing? What are the
Yeah.
aspects and why do you love doing this thing? If you love doing this thing because it's something that provides you relaxation, comfort, recuperation, balance, and stability, then usually trying to make it a monetary, like, resource or job or whatever is probably not the best thing to do for that, because by its very nature, having to do that is usually going to be stressful, pressure, uncomfortable. And so if those are the reasons that you like this thing and that's what it provides for you, going that direction probably usually isn't the best idea. But if you enjoy pressure, if you get off on that, if you get a thrill from it, if you like challenge, if you like being able to do this thing while and again get rewarded for it in a monetary manner or whatever, like, then yeah, 100% do it, dedicate to it, and I'm sure you will go far. But that's that is truly the case with anything that you wish to do. It really it is very important, if not vital in my opinion, that you understand the reasons why you feel particularly impassioned or emboldened or connected or profoundly moved by whatever it is that you're trying to do, that you're wanting to do, whether it be a hobby, a career, or whatever else. And that's how you're able to best determine whether or not it's something that you should choose to start involving monetization or money with, because that will change things due to just the very nature of what that entails in our society currently. Um, but with that being said, I do believe that's about all we can really say about this one. Let's go ahead. Let's check out the next one then. Sammy, shall I? Go ahead and take it away, bud.
All right. Next up, I have a longer one. Gaslighting DM abuses the party for fun for almost a year and almost makes me drop D&D forever by Cultural Brick 7240. So I have a lot to say about this guy and his antics as I've been brooding over it for like 8+ years now. But I'll try to keep to the main stuff he did. Everything he did was in game. He never actually abused anyone or shouted at them at the table. He was just a shitty DM messing with us and lying about it for his own amusement. Now, as we all know, gaslighting is not real. Um,
Of course not. Absolutely. Why
yeah,
would
yeah.
it be? Gaslighting? I
What's
what
that?
even is that phrase? That's
No,
just
that's a great joke. So we first meet this guy at a place where people typically hang out to play D&D, play board games, or just to chill. We just
we just
had
had
our
out,
forever
yeah,
DM leave the
bit of
country
a
to go to
typo.
college abroad and needed a new one. We found him looking for a group to run and set up a game. We asked if he could run a pre-written game starting at level 3. He said sure, and we'd be running Horde of the Dragon Queen, as none of us had ever played that campaign. I will say from
I was gonna
experience,
say for
as
good
that
reason.
is, if I can say, the worst written
Yep.
uh module for 5e.
Yep.
I played
Bad.
through it myself more than once now, and it is terribly written. Once by the book, once with homebrew elements, still terrible.
That's unfortunate. That is
What we
unfortunate.
played was not remotely Horde of the Dragon Queen, except for maybe 5% of it. Everything else was his own bullshit. It's
Well,
been a
yeah, he
while.
can't blame it on Horde of the Dragon
Yeah,
Queen. Then
it's
at that point,
well,
he
I mean, no, you blame it on the DM.
that's
Um,
one of the things. You play Horde of the Dragon Queen, at least maybe you can blame if it's a shitty experience on the module. But this, nah, I don't
no,
think this
even
thing has
even
got.
as bad as that module is, a good DM can still make it enjoyable.
Fair enough. That is
Um,
a good GM can make almost anything enjoyable. To be fair, but
yeah. It's been a while, but I think we had a Minotaur fighter, a variant human ranger, tiefling rogue, me, and maybe a human or elf sorcerer. Can't really remember because he immediately left the game after one session due to work schedule changing. He was smart to leave early. We
mm,
start by going into a cave that supposedly has a dragon cult in it to bring back proof to a nearby town. We have two NPCs with us who are just there to drag back whatever proof we find while we finish the dungeon if we were to die or something. The cave is dark, and not everyone has night vision, so the Minotaur decides to light a torch. DM tells him to make a dex save to not burn himself because he's covered in fur. He fails and takes some damage. Someone else lights the torch instead and just hands it to him just fine. Awesome. We step into the cave and see stone pillars covered in spider
Mhm.
webs. We have to walk around to get into the cave. We roll a dex save to not touch the webs going around the pillars. We fail, and a blink spider lunges at one
Jesus.
of us and tries to grapple but fails and disappears. We walk into the cave just fine after that, and I ask what would have happened if it had been a fail.
They
The DM says they would have been blinked into the spider dimension
That's not how
and
that
swarmed
works.
by a bunch of spiders and probably died. Awesome.
I mean, I will say that is how that like blink spiders do that, but it's not a spider fucking dimension.
Well,
They're
no,
in the
no, they
ethereal
just
plane.
yeah, it's different.
But I mean, is that they do that. Like they have their eggs on the ethereal plane, so they would snatch a dude, bring him in the ethereal plane, then their eggs would swarm him, and you
Yeah,
know. But yeah, they'd be dead. I mean, they're level three. Level three characters, like maybe could take one phase spider, but mm,
that's not how it
that's
works in Baldur's Gate, but they're still
mm,
threatening as hell.
yeah.
Speeding things up a bit, we see a poison plant in the corner that would shoot us if we got close. So as our fire bolts it, it hits him with the poison stinger anyway.
Of course it
We
does.
fight troglodytes and a big lizard, where the ranger on his first attack roll gets a 1, and the DM tells him his bowstring snaps.
That's
Ranger
God
asks to
damn
fix
it.
it. DM
God
asks
damn it.
if he has a spare bowstring with him. Obviously, he doesn't, so he can't fix it until he gets back to town and has someone repair it for him. Rip to the ranger that was bow focused and took sharpshooter. I tell the DM that that's dumb and nat ones that hurt your character are unfun. He says it's to balance nat 20s because they're OP. Big lizard we're fighting rolls a 1 and claws itself in the face and dies. The big lizard is apparently good enough proof for the two NPCs that there's a dragon cult because they keep calling it a drake. So we cut off the head and then go back to town with it. I just want to put out here just real quick. They were in a cave with spider thread. Um, if taking a couple of threads of large spider web and twisting it together, you could totally make a bowstring. In fact, probably a
100%.
better bowstring than any animal tendon that you would find, which is what bowstrings
If
used to be made out
if
of.
it's a giant phase spider silk
Yeah,
thread,
oh,
yeah.
fucking 100%.
Absolutely
Um,
100. I mean, not just that though, but that's stop. No, see so much, so much. As honestly, right from jump, if this nigga literally asked me to roll a check to not have my fur burned by a fucking torch, I would have slapped this bitch upside his head through. I don't even care. I don't. I don't even care if
I'm
it
out.
if it would be like if it would be online. I don't even care. I would stick my hand through the computer and slap his ass the goddamn taste out of his mouth. And I would say like, did you want to repeat that question, GM, or that statement? In fact, did you want to recant that? Because no, absolutely not.
Yeah,
And then to
no.
say that, oh, the fucking Rangers bow snaps from a net one. Go fuck yourself, bro. Go fuck
Yeah,
yourself, but like, no, screw that. That is some of
I,
the
I'd be, I'd
dumbest.
be, I'd be okay if it was like, you go to you roll on that one, and your bowstring like has a malfunction, and
Or
you have to spend it.
you
You have
fumble
to,
the arrow.
yeah, like whatever.
You
Like
try to pull the arrow back, the arrow maybe breaks or something like
I wouldn't
or
even be mad if he said if like the natural ones mattered really badly for everyone, and it was like I've seen this before where it's like, oh, you roll a natural one on your attack roll with a battle axe. Well, you miss the guy, it sticks into the ground. You have to just spend next turn
trying to
as
pull it
an
out of the
action
ground or
pulling it
something.
out. So similar to that with the ranger, you have to spend next turn restringing your bow. But saying
Yeah.
it just breaks is
Or
like,
even
okay, so
just
now
that
I'm
I am also, I
useless.
think we talked about this before too. I'm also okay with like, hey, if your friends are currently in melee distance with something and they're fighting, not one, maybe you hit your friends. Like
Yeah.
I'm okay with
Well,
that being a
that's
thing
like
too. I
that's pretty
usually will be
standard.
like, for me, for me, I will usually say roll again to see if it hits their AC by accident. Like
Yeah.
that is what I will do. But to just basically be like, yeah, your weapon, your only real weapon that you have and the thing that you like specifically spec into is breaks now without any way for you to actually
That's
fix
that's
it.
not
And it
that,
makes
that's
no sense.
not
If a ranger uses a bow, he fucking absolutely has extra strength. There's not even an item in the game that says bow strength or extra bow strength because that concept isn't even a thing. So, oh fuck. Anyway, sorry. Continue,
yeah.
bud.
Yeah, we see a 100-foot wall with an opening at the top that we have to climb up to, still in a cave. And we proceed to roll athletics every 10 feet to go higher or fail and fall. Big time
That's
waste. Obviously, lots of falling and damage, even when we use rope and pythons to climb.
that's
Awesome. At the top are two chests inside crevices that are empty and just there to waste your time as the roof slowly moves down to crush you without you noticing and trying to solve a puzzle. Literally nothing gained. I'm just going to point out there 100% if you're playing 5e, which it sounds like you are, um, ability checks technically only need to be
yep.
made every 20 minutes
Yep.
of in-game time.
Yep.
Albeit there are specific instances, puzzles, and whatever that would have you make the checks sooner than that. But if you're
Because
doing the
you're
same
trying.
if you're doing the same action,
That's what I'm saying.
vis-a-vis climbing up a cliff face, it should be once every 20 minutes. Um, on top of that, if using rope and pythons, even if you're not proficient with climbing gear, as long as someone is, they can set the rest of the party up for an easy climb.
It
That, in
gives
my
you guys
opinion,
advantage
that in my
on like
opinion would either give the party advantage or, in
you would just
special
get a
cases,
flat bonus, maybe.
no, you just wouldn't even have to make the check
That
because
too.
in all honesty, having an experienced climber with gear set up footholds for the rest of the party, unless you have like a negative to athletics, ideally any normal person can climb something as long as it's not like hours of climbing. If it's like 10 minutes of climbing, anyone could fucking do it.
Well, think of it like
Unless they're like injured or morbidly obese or crippled in
well,
some
just, I was
way.
gonna say, just if it's literally any kind of physical issue or problem, but think of it like literally climb. It's like a ladder.
Yeah,
Almost
if they set
anybody
it up
can
for you,
climb a ladder. So if you
it's a
literally just
bit
have Pythons
it's a
specifically like
it's a bit harder,
distance, where
but
you still have to pull yourself up, but you also do you can still use your bottom legs, so you have your
yeah.
entire body holding on. Like this, yeah, I agree. Honestly, if you have a climber's kit, I probably wouldn't ask you to make a check at
No,
all.
as long as you all are working together. Although
Like
if it's like a excruciating climb, if you're
if it
climbing
if
up,
it's a very high climb and you're having to like almost like you guys are tied to each other and you're like literally like climbing up, you make a check then.
yeah, like
I
it
think
could
you
be
still could
tough.
have
And
advantage maybe,
I
but
would say a 100-foot sheer wall would be tough.
yeah, it would
Um,
be. It would be.
but like if you're setting people up for success and they're not terrible at athletics, like if they don't have a negative, at least give them advantage. And also, you're going to be lowering the DC anyway because they're not climbing the cliff face; they're climbing the predetermined set of rungs. It's not quite a ladder because ladders
No, not
usually when
quite.
you're using them
Not quite.
are not straight up and down; they're at an
Yeah.
angle, so you can use the
Well, I'm also
ladder
thinking
as
about
like
like,
a
like rope ladders. Rope ladders
oh
also
no,
kind of
sure,
like,
sure, sure.
and you can still
But
climb
like
straight up, but
I don't know if you've ever climbed a rope ladder.
yeah, no, they're
Like
not they're not easy. They're not
it's
easy.
tough. But the cool thing with like pythons and rope is that they are secured. A rope ladder
Hmm.
usually isn't. Either way, I don't have to argue this more than I already have. It's not that hard. Unless you're like really
Unless you're physically unable, basically, and for
yeah, if
some
you're like
reason,
not equipped.
for some reason, in some way, this is not something.
Like fuck, I'd make the argument if the guy who set this up was like a Goliath and the person who's trying to climb up is like a goblin or a gnome, yeah, they'd have difficulty because those pythons
Oh, I don't
and
even think they'd
like
have difficulty. The dude
well
could just pull the rope
well
up with
sure
them.
they well
Like,
yes, but if they're actually making the climbing check,
sure,
say you're for whatever
it would
reason,
be further away for the
it'd
goblins
be
and gnomes to
hard.
try. Yeah,
It'd be harder. Although I still think it's completely possible.
yeah.
But let's move on. Moving forward, we see an altar of Tiamat with a giant black dragon egg in a transparent diamond case enchanted with 1,000 curses that will kill you instantly if you touch it. Awesome.
That's great.
He likes
That's
to do this
just
kind of stuff a lot. Just throw the biggest stuff he can think of at us that we can only look at and go, wow. Two half dragons, not dragonborns, who are cracked out stat wise, step forward and fight us, ending with them grappling and dragging the Minotaur into a teleport sigil at the back of the room where he meets face to face with Tiamat in some realm she's trying to escape from. Well, that would be the Nine Hells. I don't know. She curses him and tells him to fuck off and get the lizard head of the NPCs uh, back to town and return from town return it to the cave because it's her property or else. The Minotaur is thrown back to the party and tells us we gotta head back or he probably dies. He then starts hearing numbers in his head that sometimes go up, sometimes go down. The numbers were
they were
nothing.
nothing. No, they weren't.
They were just supposed to be vaguely ominous and threatening from the DM, but it was lame and never went anywhere or meant anything. So we leave the cave, go to town, see if it's burned down, and see it's burned down, and the mayor tells us he passed the head on to the next town on a wagon as proof to get help. So now we're literally railroaded following the head to hope that the fighter doesn't die. We need a wagon to catch up, and we're offered a small shitty one or a big fancy one. We take the small one because the big one would take pretty much everything we have to buy. Make it to a mountain pass with a steep drop off to one side, and see the big wagon would have been too big to pass through, and would have
It
to have
had
been
to have been
abandoned
abandoned. Yeah.
if we took it. Good thing we didn't spend all our money just to get fucked over by the DM because he thought it would have been funny for that to happen.
Good God,
This is
dude.
like session 3 at this point. Everything blurs together for a while. Just going to bullet point quick things. Ranger wants to join Ranger Guild. Gets told he'd have to catch a magic, invisible, venomous elk, saying alive, and bring it to them to get in, and he has to do it alone. I have to beg him not to get himself killed because I'm getting wise to the DM pulling kill shit on us.
Oh, just now. How is no
We
one
were,
else getting wise about this?
yeah, I know. We were like level 4, and the thing was CR7? Totally homebrewed nightmare creature just to kill the ranger. Pretended that he had other people in other groups try to do it and be clever about it and set traps and still died to it. I don't think that ever happened.
No.
I think we had 3 people join and leave somewhere in the middle, but I don't have much to say about it. Usual drop-ins and drop-outs, but we had enough to keep going. First
Why
big
would you
town we get
still?
to on a whole ass adventure to find someone to sell a +1 bow to the ranger because the smith had weapons for everyone else but not bows, and the only bow guy was in the soldiers' barracks and had to sneak into it to buy it from him, which at that point the guy just doubled the price. Player was like, what the hell, whatever, okay. The DM was asked why the price was increased, but just said you didn't even try to haggle, even though the smith gave regular prices. The DM hated the Rangers player because he would mess with him constantly. At some point, the ranger died. Literally can't remember how, and comes back with a bard next session. He's really happy with. We fight some encounter with bandits doing a toll road scam robbery thing with one 50-foot high with 50-foot high towers on the side of the road with a gate between them and a crossbow guy at the top of each. We fight them. The bar goes down from the crossbows. The fighter stabilizes him and puts a shield in the dirt, sticking it up to give his body cover so he's not just in the open, and then runs towards the towers. The crossbow guy keeps shooting at the unconscious bard and kills him. The DM said, well, they couldn't fully see him and didn't know he was unconscious. The bard player really sad his new character immediately died the first session. Every single time the DM gives an excuse, it's with a shrug and a smile as if it's not his fault. Now, I'm just going to take a quick pause as someone who has DM'd before. This character is down, prone, and has at least half cover. That means
Disadvantage.
disadvantage on attacks and at least
At least a
plus
+2.
at least a +2 to
At
AC.
least a +2 to AC.
Mm.
If it's yeah, if it's half cover +2, he might
Now
even
I
have
would argue.
three quarters
Yeah,
cover.
that's what I was going to
or
say.
plus
If he's
5.
prone behind a shield set up specifically to protect him, that'd be at least 3/4 cover in some cases,
And
unless
that
they
would
have
yeah.
they have like a really good vantage point. That'd be
So
3/4. So +5 AC with
+5
disadvantage.
AC with disadvantage.
If your crossbowmen on top of these towers are hitting to that point, you are a shitty DM. Obviously, you're already a shitty DM because they saw the fighter go over to stabilize the ranger and then or the bard and then put a shield in front of him. So your excuse that they didn't know he was down is also bullshit. Um so fuck this DM. Uh but yeah, he's not even running the module like at this
No,
point.
no. I
Um
mean, he wasn't really even
no, he never
before.
was. He never
Like
was. He never was.
he is obviously he is the quintessential player versus GM mentality. He just like I mean, hell, like OP says in the title, he just wants to fuck with them. Is really what it is. He just wants to see them suffer. He just wants to screw with them.
Yeah.
That has been apparent literally from jump when he literally had the Minotaur roll to not burn himself from lighting a goddamn torch. That alone was already an indicator of like, okay, no. And then when he rolled in that one, oh, your bow breaks. Like, as soon as he would say that, I'd be like, no, it doesn't. You're done.
I gotta go.
Not even that. I'll be like, you're out. I'll DM for everybody. I'll finish this shit real quick. Like, because that, no, yeah, it has been just brutally apparent. He has just been trying to screw with everybody this entire time.
All right. Let me continue. We spot a key tied to a flag on the roof of one of the towers. I use acrobatics to get up there and get it without falling to my death. Find a chest for the key, but it looks a little sus. Like it had glowing eyes. Not taking any chances, I hit the chest. The eyes grow dim. I hit it again. The eyes grow dark. I hit it again. It breaks open and out pops a small hand-sized chest the key fits into. We open it and there's a pouch inside. I say to not put anything inside. Instead, turn it upside down and let whatever's inside fall out away from me. The Tiefling Paladin turns it upside down and the DM says, make a dex save. He fails. The DM says the magic powder brushes against him as it falls out and he disappears. It was planar shift sand and he got teleported randomly to the plane of fire permanently and is now dead. He comes back next game with a lizardman. Jesus Christ.
I don't know why they're still doing this. Like why are you still playing this game with him without saying anything? Like did you
Yeah.
guys ever question? Did you guys ever be like, what the fuck was that? What are you doing? What was that? What do you mean? What? Like
No.
what is being done here? Like here's the thing. I will even take the reason of like I already knew that this was an absolute train wreck. I stuck around just to see how bad it got out of morbid curiosity. I would
Sure.
take that. I'd be like, you know what? Okay, fair enough. Like, because I've done that shit too a little bit where I'm like, this is clearly absolutely god awful, but you know what? Just for my own personal amusement and curiosity, let's see how bad this can actually get. But to say to be here to not say anything, to be acting like this is normal or okay, like what? I don't understand people, Sammy. Oh,
Yeah. It's tough.
oh good.
But it gets even better. We do a short
I
puzzle
know.
dungeon after a burned down town barracks. We come outside with the scroll of wish. We got it from the DM.
No,
We run
scroll.
into a sort of spooky prophetic witch lady that we had seen 2 times before and was helpful in guiding us and was obviously way out of her league in combat potential. Literally, he says we see her as we're leaving and then to roll initiative. I'm way onto his bullshit, but haven't left the game, joke's on me, and tell everyone who's eagerly rolling and getting ready to fight her to just hold on and not attack her because she hasn't said anything, and the DM didn't say she was attacking us. I'm begging everyone to just wait and not attack her, and everyone passes their turn. And it's her turn, and combat ends. Hello, friends. I ask him why the fuck we rolled initiative if she wasn't actually attacking us, and he says, that's what it says in the book. There was no book. Everything was being ass pulled as we went. I didn't realize until this second time he used that excuse. I have more, but it's pretty long already. I literally can't shorten it down to be understandable for how shit everything was. Some of the worst stuff was with the DMPC he threw in because we were down to 3 players. Now, a lot of the comments here
Top
Um,
top comment, or not top comment, but the most recent comment literally goes like, the spider dimension is about where I couldn't handle this shit anymore. I mean, again, like I said, for me, right from jump, as soon as he asked me to roll a check to not burn myself on a torch, I already would have fucking probably went off on this motherfucker, but holy shit.
yeah. There was some argument between OP and somebody about the definition of gaslighting and abuse. Because this isn't at the end of the day. I will take that stance. This is not gaslighting, this is not abuse. What it is very shitty DM work. Um
I mean, he's being an asshole. He is just
well,
he's
and
blatantly intentionally fucking with them.
there's a lot of lying and misinformation. It is not gaslighting. I'm gonna be frank.
No, he's not gas
Gas
because I mean he's not
no,
saying like no because they never made any proclamations to him about what this
no,
actually is.
no.
They were just like well, and he's just like well that's what it says. It's like he's lying. Yeah, like you said, he's lying. He's
Oh no,
not
he's
gaslighting.
100% bullshitting. And what I will say, I've said it 100 times.
We'll keep saying it 1,000, infinitely more, most likely.
Stop playing with people like this.
Please,
Now
please.
the people said that the DM insisted, or the OP insisted that they learn from this experience. They no longer deal with people like this. They are hesitant to even give people a chance that start acting like this. So you know what? Good for you, OP. While your adjectives slash descriptors for your story were not accurate, I do feel for you for dealing with this as long as you did. Although I've said this 100 times, it is your choice to deal with it. Obviously there are other things, group dynamic, social dynamic, things like that can influence someone to stick in a game or not. But ooh, I don't care how well I know the people. I would not stick around for something like this, even if it
Nah.
fucked up my friendships.
Nah, bro. Like this,
It's
like,
horse.
because your friendships are already getting fucked up with this. Like, why?
It's
This isn't
complete horseshit.
fun.
It's
This
complete
isn't
horseshit.
great. Like, why would you ever want to do this shit aside from just, again, morbid curiosity or maybe wanting to get some petty revenge back and screw the whole thing up for him or something? I don't know. Like, again, my biggest thing is, I don't know why nobody is questioning anything. Like, that's the thing. It's like, okay, you stayed in it, but like, at no point did you ask the question, what is this? And then if he says, like, it says it in the book, I'd be like, okay, show me in the book, please. I want to see where exactly, because again, here's the thing. People can sometimes misread shit or misinterpret shit. And if it's some blatantly stupid stuff that happened like that, like most of this, let's all work together to see exactly what was said, how it was interpreted, and how we can maybe address this. Because, excuse me, this shit should not
Oh,
just be ignored.
oh God, no.
Ah, my God. Like I just again, OP, if you ever see this again, I'm sorry if we're going hard on you at the moment. And I understand you guys have, apparently it really you stopped wanting to play for like 3 years from this. And I get it because this is shitty and aggravating. But I also don't understand why people are like, it turned me off for the game because it's not the game, it's the person. It's clearly the person. And it's like you like I don't understand why people keep saying like I didn't know it was like playing no D&D was better than playing bad D&D. But it's like okay, well it's the person. Why didn't you ask questions? Why didn't you question? Why doesn't anybody? Because again, the whole thing can be seen through so easily. This guy isn't some fucking evil genius. Okay, he's just an evil idiot. He's a douchebag. Is all he is. And OP keeps saying, the biggest thing too, OP keeps saying he kept getting wise. He was like, I was wise to a lot of his tricks and shenanigans. Why didn't you address it directly then? Why
Oh
did you
yeah.
keep trying to be like, well, I'm going to do this stuff? Like, don't get me wrong. It's like, sure, it can be fun to kind of maybe get one over on the GM who's pulling some stupid bullshit or whatever, and you see through it. But
You're not actually
this is
gaining
shit that
anything by
needed to
just
be
sitting there.
addressed outside of game because this was an outside of game problem, ironically, that was being expressed in game. This is not, this whole thing was just God, bro. I hate people like this who just want to screw with people. They just want to watch the world burn. And it's not even for a good reason, just because they're fucking pathetic. And it's just, yeah, God, just this is some of the shit that I have a personal pet peeve about as well. It's just like, honestly, shit. Just fucking shit. I think we've probably said all we really need to say about this one here. Let's go ahead. We're going to do the last one here today. Then we probably got to get out of here. This one is a little bit shorter, so no worries. This one's titled Player Insists It's Not a Fetish. NSFW warning for any of you, maybe more sensitive individuals out there. Severe. This story is posted by Severe Firefighter 80. I feel that this story is a bit boring compared to some of the others posted here, but I am curious to hear what others' reactions to this. I have a player I am probably going to be kicking from my Pathfinder game, who I have played with for a few months now. I have run a series of mini campaigns, and this player's character for every campaign is the exact same. Some kind of giant race, extremely muscular woman who grows in size during combat encounters and has a very innocent and cute anime goyle demeanor. The build is the exact same, some form of barbarian, and there is a general disinterest in combat or dungeon crawling, which sucks for me because I put a lot of work into the dungeons I design, and a lot of focus on points that feel fetishistic to me. Points such as their character not fitting through doors, their character knocking stuff over with her gigantic body, their character ripping through clothes because there is nothing that fits. You probably get the picture at this point. The player is also very fixated on finding an otherwise average-sized man to tower over in a romantic relationship, which often comes up every time the party comes to a settlement of any kind. I struggle to think of specific situations because a lot of this stuff is just peppered into regular play, which makes it hard to address without stopping the game entirely. Things came to a head last session when the player described their barbarian getting the killing blow on a knight lieutenant of the campaign's BBEG as their character sitting on the knight's chest and denting his breastplate with her massive body. After the battle, the player tried to describe their character attempting to take the enhanced armor to the blacksmith to get it sized up, and being unable to fit through the door because her legs were too wide. After she squeezed through, it was another description of her knocking over several weapon racks and even a whole anvil. And at that point, I cut the session short because I was becoming extremely uncomfortable. Well, it is really difficult to confront this player on their characters because they are extremely content to say that it isn't a fetish and it's a character design choice. They will point to other players who will make characters that are sexualized in some respect. For example, one of the other players' characters is an elven rogue who dresses in very tight clothing and asks why that is allowed, but they get attacked for their design choices. Now, I'm not a prude, and I don't have an issue with a muscular woman character being sexualized, provided it isn't excessive. I struggle to explain to this player the difference between a fetishistic character and a sexualized character. It doesn't help that I can't tell if the player is trying to gaslight me about whether or not their character is fetishistic, or they are very socially unaware, I'm suspecting some kind of disability perhaps, and just don't understand. I will probably just kick them anyway at this point for how uncomfortable everyone else is at the table, but I'd like to at least try and articulate why this isn't okay, but a character in a bodysuit or in a lot of leather might be. I will post an update when I have a talk with the player, but for now, I am trying to figure out how to best make my point without just saying, you're making everybody uncomfortable and we'd like you to leave. I'm hoping that I can at least express the issue well enough that the player might behave differently in their next/other games. End
Yeah.
post.
The one of the comments is a great example of how to explain it. The reason the big lady and the bodysuit character are different comes down to descriptions. I can say my character has a close-fitting leather bodysuit and leave it at that unless there's some specific reason to mention it again. If I'm constantly talking about the character's body, the curves and creases, the smell and the creak of the leather, etc., then it's a bit different. It stops being this is what my character is wearing and starts being this is a core trait of the character and part of why I'm playing them, which is 100% how that works. Being a big lady, nothing wrong with that. In fact,
No, it's a
big
bad.
lady,
It is a perfectly badass character concept. Everybody loves it,
big muscular lady character is one of my favorite.
I was gonna say it's a great trope. It's a
Well, no,
great.
it's one of my favorite tropes. Because it allows for a couple things. If your DM is running a quote unquote medieval setting, the amount of muscular women or women in positions of
Strength.
power or fighting or strength are lower, more likely than not. In fact, in a lot of D&D, I think, in my experience, although not intentionally, women of power are pretty much set to two distinct areas, and it's
Magic.
rich woman who has magic, who is powerful because they are wealthy and have magic powers. Nothing to do with their physicality. Most of the time, they're extremely beautiful and have a commanding presence because they are magically inclined, beautiful rich women. The second is woman who is extremely strong and larger, and they have carved a niche in some sort of fighting organization, whether it's a Knights Order, a Paladin Order, whatever. But they're not the common instance. They're the token female
They would be,
representation.
yes, they would be more rare.
Um,
Um,
whereas you know, in an ideal world, guardsmen posts, ranger, paladin, fighter groups and orders, mercenary groups, bandits, all this would also just have proficient women. Um, I understand some people wanting to make the case of like, well, you know, women are anatomically less physically built, whatever you want to call it. But the cool thing about fantasy, the cool thing
I
about
mean, that's
a lot of things is that it's not just physical strength
no.
that comes into play,
And a lot of
um
it is suffused with. I mean, that's why I love the con. I've always loved the concept of like a gnome fighter who's got like a 24 strength or whatever, is geeked up like crazy and he can like lift
yeah,
crazy amounts
and
of
like
weight even despite his super small size. Like it's the
what I
same
love
concept here. Like
what I love is like, you play a gnome barbarian, regardless of gender. Say you start
yeah,
with a 16 strength, and part of being a gnome, being a small race, is that you can't hold heavy weapons, big two-handed weapons. So you would start with a longsword in 50. Uh, so you start with a weapon that is versatile two-handed. So you would do like either a D8 if you're using like a spear, or a D10 if you're using a longsword. But me as a DM, you hit that 20, especially, you got to 18, now you're hitting 20. For me, 20 strength, we've talked about this before. You hit that max, that normal max on an ability score. For me, you're a gnome barbarian, regardless of race, regardless of height. You have 20 strength. Fuck it.
you can
Use a
wield
great sword. Use
that
a
great
maul.
sword.
Use a great axe.
Now you
But you have
probably
to. But
can't
like,
carry it normally,
no,
but
I think you could. I think 20 strength.
well, no, I mean like you couldn't like sheath it on your back or because it's too fucking big. It's too
No,
long.
but maybe you'd have like a
But
custom
you could
sheath
like, yeah, I was gonna say you could have a
where
sheath
it
where like
goes where
it's sideways. Yeah,
it goes horizontal,
it's horizontal.
or you know what?
So, but
Fuck
you
it.
could
You know what?
definitely just wield it.
Fuck it. Fuck it. It has a shorter shaft.
Yeah.
Because you know what? It's not the shaft isn't the issue.
Yep.
It's the
Nope.
weight of the weapon. And
Yep.
most of the weight of a weapon comes from if you're using a great sword,
It's the
maybe the
metal
maybe
of the
the
sword.
maybe the great sword's slightly shorter to equate for your height. Still does 2d6 damage. So you're
Yeah.
using a maul. The shaft is slightly shorter to sit within your comfortable swinging distance. Still does 2d6. Great
Mhm.
axe still does d12. Fuck it. Why not? You want to use a lance? Fuck it. It's
Do
slightly
it.
shorter, but it's the
You
same
have a
reach. I don't
20
give a shit.
strength. Why
I
the
don't give a
hell
shit.
not?
You hit 20 strength. fuck it. I don't care. The same reason why it's like if a wizard or an artificer hits 20 intelligence, fuck it. You know another language. You
Yeah.
hit 20 wisdom, fuck it. You can read lips. It's one of those things where it's like I don't want to limit, and especially I don't want to limit when it's one of those things where like I'm choosing a race that reflects my character's backstory because it's fun for me, but there's no reason to give a negative, especially when they hit those superhuman levels of abilities. And that goes across the board. Charisma's at a 20. Your average conversation, you don't need to roll a persuasion check to get someone to like you.
No.
Because you know what? You're just naturally
you're
persuasive.
pretty supernaturally
Your
charismatic.
wisdom at 20, you don't need to make an insight check to see if someone's lying to you in a non-important way.
Yeah, you can tell
A
that
con
something's
a,
off, that they're probably not being
someone
completely
walks up
honest.
to you and they're trying to sell bullshit. You at 20 wisdom, I feel like you just know.
Yeah.
At 20 intelligence,
Or at least you get an inclination. Something because
yeah,
again, at that point, your passive wisdom's gonna be pretty
not
damn
not
high
like
anyway.
not
Like,
like a full story, but like
no.
there's something
But
off
you
here.
you get an
Um,
inclination of something again.
at
Like
20 intelligence, like, man, you don't have to spend a bunch of time doing things you didn't have to before. Fuck,
investigation,
you
arcana,
you read books,
history.
you read books twice as fast as a normal person.
You
Um,
recall information really easily about
at at
stuff or can
at
figure shit out quickly. Like,
at con 20, you could be a fully functioning alcoholic. You're not making con saves for that.
yeah.
Normal bitch boy
Holy fuck.
poisons, normal bitch boy poisons.
Nothing.
That's not an issue for you.
Nah,
Um,
nothing. You
you
automatically take the half one.
you're not immune to the poison condition, but like if
No.
someone's using like some fucking dumb fucking poison,
Yeah,
they
if it's some basic ass mother
no,
like
you don't need it.
you just make the save sometimes. Like
You got you
it
got
doesn't even matter.
you got 20 decks. 20 decks. That's like you are a dexterous
You are the
motherfucker.
quickie you are the
And you're like,
quickest
hey,
ass.
can I quickly walk into this alley and use the two walls of these buildings to get up on the roof real quick? Yeah, fuck it. Yeah,
Do
of
it.
course you can. Can I slip
Passive
behind this
acrobatics.
box?
Do it.
Can I slip behind this box and then crouch down, go around and switch into this doorway? 100% if it's reasonable. If I'm strength, can I just work out or go for a run or use this
Can I
heavy
just
weapon?
climb? Can I pull my own weight and climb up
Yeah,
this
can I just
thing?
like climb over this fence? No, of course you can.
Yeah.
You have 20. You have a
You have
20
20
in the
strength.
ability. That is
You are
very high.
you are superhero level
Considering
at that
like
point.
some super strong crazy monsters have like a 23
Yeah.
kind of stat. Like, yeah, fuck it. Yeah.
Yes.
You're the size of a humanoid, yet you can do shit that like some monsters can't even do.
That's what I'm saying.
I
And
think
hell,
you've
even
earned
like
your spot.
even like again, if you get any higher than that too, it increases that threshold of just like you don't need to just keep rolling for everything like
Yeah, I'm a
all the
barbarian.
fucking
I have a
time.
24 in con and a 24 in strength at
Yeah.
level 20.
Can I climb up this wall real
Yes.
quickly?
Yes.
Yes, you can
I'm
just
not even
climb
gonna
up
make you
the
like.
No, you don't have to roll for that.
Oh, I'm
Like
sorry. You have your passive athletics check is so you have a plus 2 athletics. You have
yeah,
24
if you have
strength.
proficiency with athletics, 24 strength,
What is it? Proficiency at that point is plus
plus
6.
6. Yeah, we
So you have
plus 6.
plus 6 plus
And if you have 20, it'd
another
be 5.
6.
Oh no, 24, yeah. So it'd be plus 7. With a 24
So
it'd be
you'd
plus
have
7.
a passive. It's 10.
It would be a passive
plus,
13. It
well,
would be
no,
a 13
plus
with
13.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Like
So you have a
if we're
passive
talking about
23.
if we're talking about just the ability modifier and the proficiency, it would be 13, but then it would also be plus
A passive
10,
check.
which is just the bit. Yeah, so you would have a 23 total, a passive athletics of 23.
That's
So
not even
like
paying attention. Yeah, of course you can.
yes,
Yeah,
you
I'm not
can
gonna
just
make you
do
roll.
that.
Unless the only time I'd make you roll is if something was actively harrowing you. And like
Because then maybe you could make a mistake.
that's the
and
big
maybe,
thing about
yeah.
like passive checks versus active checks. If nothing's happening, unless you want someone to like if they're being like, hey, I want to use my attention to focus on something, the passive checks are there for a reason. Someone's running down an alley and there's like, oh, there's something that's going to trip you up, but their passive
Perception.
acrobatics or passive perception is a 26. They're going to notice that. Like,
Yeah,
and
it's
unless
not
there's some sort of
possible
weird
for them
magic,
not to.
unless there's some sort of weird trap, that they
Is
wouldn't even be able to
deliberately
perceive.
designed to be sneaky
And
or
you know what?
unnoticeable.
Have him make the check. But if it's something that they would notice, especially as a high level character, or someone who's very proficient, say they take alert or observant, and
Or
they're
they have
also,
expertise, you
yeah,
know.
fuck it. Like, yeah, sorry, but like that character is going to be immune to that thing. Or and like I
Or it's
like
gonna be
that.
really hard to get by
Yeah,
on. Like it's just that's just
I
how it
like
goes.
that's one of the things I like about the passive stuff is that you can,
Yeah.
actually give it justice. And that's something
And
I try to do in my games, but
it
it's hard.
and I
You
appreciate that
forget
so much. Because yeah, so
and
a lot of people don't. A lot of people again are always stuck, and we've talked about this before, right? Where a lot of people are stuck on the concept of you have to roll. You have to roll for everything. You live
well,
by
I
the
think
dice, you die by the dice. And it's like,
at lower levels I understand it a lot more than I do at high level because high level
yeah,
is very like
but even then, because even at lower levels, again, if you get expertise in some way, if you rolled really high for your skills just in the beginning and you somehow got an 18 and you could boost that to 20 right at lower levels, the same thing still kind of applies where it's like your passive is like 18 for something. Like
yeah, that's
just
pretty
just
much
just let them have it at that point. If you have a passive like 18 acrobatics, yes, you can just like you can jump from wall to wall if it's close enough, or even just like pull yourself up. Like you have a passive athletics of 18, like whatever. Like it's just like more rolls does not automatically equate to more fun. Same thing as just because something is harder or more difficult doesn't make it more fun slash better. Just
no.
baseline. Again, what makes it fun and better is if it's actually conducive to the narrative and to the actual direct entertainment and investment of the characters and the players. Just let them do some shit sometimes. They don't need to roll and potentially fail at everything, especially, yes, I would agree with Sammy, at higher levels. They don't need to make constant checks to see if they fumble or fuck up at higher levels. Just let them be badass and cool at those higher levels. If they're at lower levels, yes, Sammy, I agree. It makes more sense where it's like they might have a bit more of a potential to mess up because they're maybe not as, but even then, again, if their stat is high enough, at the same token, it is kind of just like, okay, you know what? Even at that level, they were able to get so good at this thing. Even now, just let them have it. Just it doesn't always have to be a big thing, okay? Like Sammy was saying, all in moderation and being reasonable about it, right? You don't have like just be reasonable, just be balanced. If it's really not a big deal or a big thing, just let them do the thing that they want to do. If they're currently being harried or stressed or whatever by, an impending threat or problem, yeah, make them roll a check. And because that actually has much more of a true narrative, risk and consequence. But,
Yeah.
like stop trying to just, you like Sammy said, like remember the passive shit because it's there for a reason, because it helps. In fact, it makes the game run smoother. Bogging down the game with too many constant dice rolls for every last motherfucking thing, especially if you know your party or your players, one, if not all of them, maybe suffer from just having abysmally, like chronically low rolls, is another aspect to be like, stop doing that. If you know they roll shit most of the time for whatever reason, maybe it's tonight, maybe it's just a thing that you guys know, maybe you're cursed, who knows, whatever the reason, you know this. Stop making them roll for every little goddamn thing. Give them more
But
opportunity
also,
to just
but also like I get not having rolls at all is also a problem.
agree. You can't
Just
just
to be
because then
adamant.
it's just you're just watching a cinematic at that point. You're just watching a cutscene, and nobody wants to fucking play a
Well, no, and
cutscene.
I've heard
You
of
want to play the game.
I've heard of D&D games where they only go off of like passive checks,
Yeah,
which is
real. I
which
don't know if
to
I've
me
ever heard of that. I don't know if I've ever seen
which like
that.
it's like a concept, right? Where it's like you build your character. I mean, think of it. It's kind of like the video games where,
You're just always this good at this thing.
well, no,
Depending.
it's just like, okay, I expect my character to be good at this,
Mhm.
decent at this, whatever, and instead of rolling for the chance to do worse or better, you're always at, and
Yeah,
this is
just
like
just the
in
passive. Yeah.
other TTRPGs and other games, like this is actually a thing where it's like I'm always decent at this or pretty good at that or really good at this. And like
Mhm.
there's something to be said where like that's not a bad way to run
No,
certain
I
parts
don't.
of
I don't
D&D,
think it would be bad, but like
but
there is something to be said though, like you were saying.
there's in a lot of in like in my Tuesday game, there are times like I'm playing a rogue fighter as my
Mhm.
main character, and part of me doesn't like, he'll be like, oh, roll for stealth, and I have advantage. I have, like a
Expertise.
plus 16 to stealth or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Hmm.
But part of me is like, if I can just get away with the fact that my passive is like 26, I don't want to roll. Like, and
I mean,
I'm
that's what I'm
not
saying.
saying
It's like
that I
I
never
why
will.
can't you ever just take you go like technically speaking, I do believe in the game, rules as written, you can just choose to take your passive for whatever
Yeah,
role. You can just basically be like, I'm
I
gonna
like
use
want to
my
check it out
passive
now.
for this. If you don't
Okay,
want to roll, because you could potentially roll higher,
all right.
potentially.
So if I'm doing passives correctly, it's 10 plus the score
Yes.
plus 5 if you have advantage.
Yes, correct.
My passive stealth
Be
on this
31.
let me do the math real quick. 10
If it's
plus
10 plus 16 plus
no,
5,
my passive stealth on this character is 32.
yeah.
If and it's because so I get advantage from Boots of Elvenkind,
Yep.
and that's if I'm moving across. Like while you wear these boots, your steps make no sound regardless of the surface you are moving across. You have advantage on dexterity stealth checks that rely on moving silently. Which, to be fair, if I'm out in the open, I'm not expecting the advantage. If I'm like, not really
It
using my
it
stuff, but
depends. You could
but
still
like
make a case for it, but
sometimes I'm a big proponent of not letting stealth be game breaking. But for example, I also have a plus
if you're a
17.
rogue, I mean,
I have a plus 17 to acrobatics. I have a plus 12 to athletics. I have a plus 15 to perception. So I have a 25 passive perception.
yeah.
If I'm not doing anything, fuck it. I have a plus 9 to survival.
I mean, even
That's
if you
that's
are, like
19.
we're
That's a
like
19 survival check no
even if
matter
you
what I'm
aren't
doing.
doing anything, that's just your that is
That's
your
how
natural
like
skillful ability to do this particular
imagine
skill.
my passive stealth at any given moment is 32.
Yeah.
As
Why?
like there is no reason for me to roll in most instances. Now,
No.
he still makes me roll for like the intentional stealth checks and stuff like that. And I have been able to make the case of like, hey, we're not doing anything really big. My passive stealth is fucking 32. And he's like, all right, like, you know what? Yeah, like you wouldn't have to roll here. And I think a lot of DMs, even once we're experienced, forget that like those passives are there for a reason. And yeah, the mechanic for using them is not set in stone.
It's not the best. It's not the
No,
best
but
established,
I
but
think I think there are times where it makes sense, there are times where it doesn't. And I don't get mad when he asks me to roll, especially if
no.
it's for something like very deliberate. But also, like, I'm like, hey, I want to just like jump from this place to this place. And he's like, roll acrobatics. I'm like, dude, I have a plus 17, which means I have a 27 acrobatics as a
Yeah.
as a
Just
as like a
naturally.
as a natural acrobat.
I
He
have
goes,
a
oh,
natural acrobatics
I just have to
of
remind him, and
27.
and
Yeah.
and he'll be like, ah, fuck, yeah, like
Yeah,
this is easy
yeah,
enough.
you can do
If
it.
it was like a difficult, if it's like an
Again,
outside of
maybe if
normal,
you were under stress, like I'm saying, if you
mm,
were under like a more stressful situation where you're
not
being
even that.
chased or maybe
Like,
like actively shot at while you're trying to do it,
I think
then it'd be
it's
like, okay.
also, if it was like, hey, I want to go from this alley to the top of this roof, or like somersault my way up somewhere that's reasonable, it's fine. But if I'm trying to do like crazy shit, where it's like I want to jump off this bridge, swing across this rope, and end up over here, it's like, well, you might be really good, but when you're doing
There's a lot
crazy
of
shit like that,
variables to take into
anything can
account.
happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables.
Even if we're not in combat, whatever. Like I'm like, okay,
It's
I'm
it's
fine
not
with
purely just based off of your skill alone to accomplish
no,
that whole thing. And or
yeah,
even like even better if you want to jump like onto a large creature, right? You want to jump onto like a dragon or something. Like they do have mechanics for that where you literally can make acrobatics slash or athletics checks to jump onto large creatures and to like do that. And so yeah, I would say, and then usually that is I think a I don't know if it's a contested check or if it's just a single check from whatever, but that would make sense for me. Where you're like, yes, there is more than just your skill that is necessary to accomplish this. So make a roll for it to see, how well it works out. Um, but yeah, for this whole story, OP, if you ever see this, just, I mean, I know you don't really want to say that, but honestly, the way you put it is literally like saying you're making everyone uncomfortable and would like you to leave. Like, I would ask, like, or actually, maybe I don't even need to because it seems like you have already talked to them about this a couple of times. And the way that the player seems to respond is a very defensive, like whatever thing. But honestly, the way that you phrased it, you could do it nice. I think one of the comments down below actually does um say it pretty well, which is the top voted comment, and he says, "Hey there, we've talked about this before more than once, and you're unwilling to compromise. You are simply looking for something in your gaming experience that doesn't align with what the rest of the group wants. So unfortunately, I think it's probably best if we part ways here, but good luck to you, and we hope that you find what you're looking for." Like that is a perfectly reasonable, cordial, respectful means of addressing the issue there. And again, more people, like I said, like, yes, confrontation will always be uncomfortable. It will always be difficult to a certain extent. But honestly, honesty, in my opinion, for the most part, is still always, most of the time, the best policy. Like, you don't need to be an asshole about it. Just be honest, though. Just say, like, hey, we talked about this and you're not really willing to compromise or maybe, whatever. So, unfortunately, I think it's best if we kind of just part ways. And it's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. Simple doesn't always mean easy, but it is simple. It is simple and straightforward. Um, but other than that, I think we've kind of talked everything we can about this particular subject. I do believe we'll have to call it here, y'all. Got to get out of here. We got some other things we got to do.
Yeah.
But thank you guys so much for sticking with us this long if you have. We hope you enjoyed all of our rants, our raves, our perspectives, our thoughts. We had quite a bit of them in this one for sure. Like we said, this was quite the debate. I think the debate in the ponder heavy episode indeed for a lot of this stuff happening. Quite a roller coaster of things. But we, again, thank you guys so much. If you liked the video, be sure to like, comment down below your thoughts and feelings. Remember to hit that notification bell to make sure you never miss out on anything we're posting here at the Arcane Archive. Subscribe and share the channel, and we will be sure to catch y'all next time when we dive back down into the archive. Hey, back.